Okay, President Chen, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. It is now 5:30 on September 9th, 2021, and I am calling our regularly scheduled school board meeting of the San Mateo Foster City School District Board of Trustees to order. I am immediately going to put us into closed session where we have 5 items to review in closed session. Item number 1, 2.1, which is Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Discipline Dismissal Release. Item 2.2, which is actually the same thing, which is Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Discipline Dismissal Release, District Office Reorganization. Item 2.3, Conference with Legal Counsel, Existing Litigation, Government Code Section 54956.9, Student versus San Mateo Foster City School District. For the following 4 cases: OAH case number 202011056, case number LRFR 3202100412, OAH case number 20210606663, and case number LRF 3202100802. I usually don't read all those, and they're all on the agenda just for future use, or anybody wants to see them if they're actually taking notes. Next is item 2.4, which is review of non-public school, non-public agency ratification ESL contracts for the 21-22 school year. And our last item, 2.5, which is review of non-public school, non-public agency contracts for the 2021-22 school year. And if these discussions on the 5 items are not completed before 6:30, the closed session will continue following the regular meeting. So with that, I will recess us to closed session. Thank you.
Okay, President Chen, go ahead.
Great, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Peter. It is now 6:31 and we are returning out of closed session with nothing to report. So we are reconvening our regularly scheduled meeting. First up on the agenda is our flag salute. So if everyone would please stand, and you're welcome to unmute if you want. And we begin. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. We're going to move to roll call. We'll start with Trustee Corzo.
Here.
Trustee Proctor.
Here.
Trustee Watkins.
Here.
And Trustee Warren.
Here.
And I am here as well. So everyone is here. We will move to approval of tonight's agenda. Does anyone have any changes, additions? Anyone want to make a motion?
Motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Okay.
Thank you, Trustee Watkins, for the motion. Trustee Corzo for the second. Roll call vote. Trustee Corzo.
Here.
Say here or did? Sorry. Yes.
Here. Yes.
Yes. Trustee Proctor.
Yes.
Trustee Watkins.
Yes.
Trustee Warren.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Next, we will move to public statements related to non-agenda topics. Actually, before we do that, Trustee Corzo, would you mind doing the language transition announcement, please?
Sure. Gracias por estar presentes. Si alguien ocupa traducción, por favor levanten la mano para que le cambiemos la idioma, o también puede cambiar la idioma en su pantalla haciendo clic en el icono del mundo que está en su pantalla abajo. Gracias.
Thank you, Trustee Corzo. And for those who are interested, we have about 53 participants on the Zoom line, I guess it is. All right, so we are on item 4.1, public statements related to non-agenda topics. The San Mateo Foster City School Board cannot act upon any matter that has not been included and publicly posted on the agenda except under limited circumstances as permitted by law. The board may refer matters raised in this forum to staff to investigate and or action where appropriate. Peter, would you mind opening up public comment for non-agenda items, please?
Absolutely. To the members of the public that might be joining us for the first time, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom in order to notify us that you'd like to make public comment on, again, non-agenda items. These are items that are not going to be discussed later on in tonight's meeting. President Chin, we have 2 so far. We have one in the a phone number ending in 4326. And then we have, after that, Fernando. Again, the number 4326, go ahead, and if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself. You may need to unmute.
Yep. So yeah, I'm Drew. I attended 2 weeks ago, roughly, and during that meeting, I thought I heard that public is allowed to attend the meeting in person. And so I'm standing outside and building's locked. I think I'm in the right place. I could be totally wrong, but I thought I checked it out and got the right location. So that's my first public statement that I wasn't expecting this to make. Yeah, so I don't know what the protocol is getting in at this point. And then the other one is just about the board meeting agendas. And I stopped by about a week ago and just asked about how do the board meetings, how do the board meetings, like, is there an email like sent out 3 days before, 5 days before an agenda is posted? Because I don't think there is. I'm on the newsletter. I don't have kids in the school. And so that's something that I think I heard in the district election or the district stuff that there was like, oh, 10,000 people were notified. And I've never gotten any email like from the newsletter, and I don't need the newsletter, but if there's some other email list to be notified for like the agendas, most organizations, there's an email that goes out for like council meetings. It just says, hey, the agenda's been posted. Sometimes there's links, sometimes stuff like 3 days before, just to let the public know. So I would ask that the school districts, the IT department or whatever, can figure this out to get something like that in place. I would definitely appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. All right, next we have Fernando. Fernando, go ahead.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can, Fernando. Go ahead.
So good evening. I am a substitute teacher for the San Mateo Foster City School District, and I am getting increasingly concerned with regards to the rise in COVID cases, especially amongst the Mu variant. And I just remember, it just so happens that the distance learning option is no longer an option. And I was wondering if that could be reinstated for the upcoming fall or for the upcoming winter seasons, as it is going to be unfortunately exponentially bigger than last year, possibly last year. But most importantly, it is becoming increasingly unsafe to continue having to teach in person, just basically having to go from class to class all day. And I'm worried I do not want to end up becoming sued or liable because of this. So if possible, can you please respond if it is possible to have a distance learning option for those wishing to seek it for both the students and staff? I understand Palo Alto Unified School District has started offering them recently, and I feel that our school district has the necessary resources to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. Next, we have Reina. Reina, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I got on a few minutes late, so if anybody has brought up testing, I apologize if I'm repeating anything. But I was just wondering why we are doing pooled testing as opposed to individual students being tested, because I just found out that the federal government is believe paying for most of that, a lot of that. I'm not really 100% sure, but I know other schools in the county are doing individual testing instead of pool testing. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Raina. Okay, President Chen, we have no other hands for public comment at this time.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for providing their comments. And thank you, Drew, for showing up in person. Really happy you're here. Sorry the doors were shut, but you're here now, which we're very happy that you're here. Superintendent Ochoa, would you mind responding to those comments during your superintendent's report? That would be very helpful. Okay, we will move on to 4.2, which is public statements related to agenda items. Persons will be called on at the appropriate time. Next up is item 4.3, foundation and committee reports. Does anybody have anything they want to report out that has happened in the last couple of weeks? Any foundation or committee reports?
CDAC had a meeting on August 31st, where we were introduced to a little bit of the who's who in special education, as well as just getting acquainted to a new year and topics that would be interesting to parents in special education.
Great, thank you, Trustee Warren. Anyone else? No?
I'll just add that the Sanctuary Task Force is continuing to have discussions about, the kind of biggest needs that their students and families are facing in our district, and advocating for those needs.
Great, thank you, Trustee Corzo and Trustee Warren. Anyone else? I know. Okay, I know that it's still sort of the beginning of the school year, so a lot of our committees are actually meeting next week. I think we'll have a larger report out with our next meeting. So next on the agenda is our updates from our labor unions. Peter, if you wouldn't mind bringing in our representatives, please.
Absolutely, if you just give me one moment.
I can go first. I don't see anybody else on here. If you guys want me to go first. Okay.
Sorry, Alicia, would you give me 1 second?
Yeah.
Arthur, I can't seem to find your name in the list of attendees. I'm not sure if it's maybe how you're logged into Zoom, but Julie, if you are there, would you mind raising your hand? Okay, it looks like Julie MacArthur might not be with us just yet, but I'll keep an eye out for her. I have brought forth Alicia and Christina.
I'll go ahead and go first. The only things that I have to report is that we held a special meeting last night, and the tentative agreement for our contract passed with 100% of the members voting yes, as well as the Juneteenth MOU, which is good because obviously you want more people to be in favor of it. I wouldn't be as comfortable if it was like a 50 or 60-40 vote or whatever. So 100% is fabulous. I was happy to see that. And then the other thing, and I'm not going to get too into it because I have a feeling that Mr. Ochoa will be doing this, but we participated in the strategic plan today. And I just wanted to thank people, well, Miss Tim actually, for the opportunity to include CSEA, because it's nice to have voices from all across the board. And I know that, there was a whole bunch of positions there present today. So just thank you. And that's all I have.
And I'll go ahead and get started. Yes, it was an incredible day working together. I think there were, from what I understood, 19 schools represented. So that was incredible. I just wanted to take a few moments just to give you a little bit of the state of how Park School is doing. And I know most of you know me, but just in case there are others that don't, I'm Christina Haley, the principal at San Mateo Park Elementary School. Being back together on campus has been an absolute dream come true. But I also have to say that we have been COVID-free for the past 3 weeks, which I know isn't the same everywhere. I just have to celebrate that moment. We did start out with 2 COVID cases in the same class, which was definitely worrisome. We also had a teacher who got COVID from her own children, even though she was vaccinated. So that started things out in a little bit of a stressful way. But once they were all quarantined and were able to come back to school, we turned a positive corner and have been mitigating the spread of COVID ever since. So we're following protocol and working hard to keep those germs away. Between summer and October break, 9 of our teachers will have a Gillingham training with OG's structure, as it's called, literacy approach. It introduces the idea of breaking reading and spelling down into smaller skills involving letters and sounds, and then building on those skills over time. We are fortunate to have had this training and are already using the OG assessments with some of our students. I'm excited to tell you that we started our ELD groups this week, giving all of our English learners the opportunity to practice their English with students who are at their same language level for 30 minutes a day. Each student benefits greatly from that focused language instruction, and it has quickly become a bright spot in their day. And actually the teachers are loving it also. Our school was chosen to participate in a research project called the CLAVIS intervention with Stanford. CLAVIS is a language-based small group literacy curriculum designed for upper elementary multilingual students and their peers. So our 4th and 5th grade teachers will receive professional development and coaching on language and literacy instruction for multilingual learners. They will also receive free curriculum and materials that will stay with our school after the project is over. So we have another fantastic opportunity for learning, and we just feel extremely fortunate. It's been a fabulous start to the year. Come by and visit us anytime. I want you to see our students thriving and see our beautiful garden, of course. Thank you.
Okay, we have promoted Julie to a panelist. Julie, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for waiting. I'm actually in 2 meetings at the moment. We are having a town hall with our members currently to discuss the long-term and short-term independent study, and there's a lot of questions that we're working with. So I'll be relatively brief, so I can hop back into that and get our teachers all sorted out with the independent study. So I want to say, I'm very pleased that we were able to work out what seems to be a solid plan for making sure students are able to stay active and engaged in classrooms when they go out on COVID-related illnesses. So that's one thing. I was very excited today to participate in the strategic planning, and I heard a lot of great feedback from the other teachers who participated. The process felt very refreshing, very grounding in, I think what we all want for kids and how we can sort of get students where we want them to go as far as achieving, excellence in all academic areas and social emotional areas. And then finally, I know on your agenda tonight is to look at Dennis Hills being our assistant superintendent of student services. And I want to offer congratulations to him. It's been a pleasure to work with him in HR, in our bargaining. I think he's just what that department needs. And so I look forward to continuing to work with him in this different capacity. So well done with that choice. So that's all I really have. Again, thank you for being patient and waiting for me. I'm actually gonna go back and see if I can't answer some more questions about independent study. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Alicia, Christina, and Julie.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for all the updates. We're really glad that you guys were able to attend and give us your updates. Moving on to item 4.5, announcements. Does anyone have any announcements they would like to make? Okay.
Sorry. I just would like to take a second to recognize that we did just have a holiday, right? Labor Day, and want to give a shout out to our unions and to, the history of unions and the progress and the wins that they've, worked hard for working families. So go unions.
Thank you. Anyone else with any other announcements they'd like to make?
I'll say one thing just about the reminding everybody about the COVID testing sites at our schools. It's I've gone to a couple. It's pretty easy, straightforward, and I'm just so glad that we're able to offer this in our schools so that people can access COVID testing easier. So check it out on the website for the dates.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. We're moving on to item 4.6, Superintendent's Report. Superintendent Ochoa.
Thank you, President Chin. I'll start. Am I really loud? Sorry. I'll start by addressing a couple of the questions that came up just a few minutes ago. We're sort of getting our grounding again and having meetings take place in person. So I do want to apologize that we did have the doors locked just a few minutes ago. Our maintenance department will make sure that that doesn't happen next time. So that's just a programming note on that. In addition to that, we'll look at how we message our school board meeting upcoming agendas. I actually believe we do send a mass email. I don't know yet who's on that recipient list, but I will check with our IT department about that as well. In terms of COVID testing, it is something that we're going to discuss later in this meeting as well. But part of what we decided to do with implementing COVID pooled testing is that it's a way to be able to do a scan of thousands and thousands of children every week. And districts that are choosing to do individualized testing are doing an extremely small percentage of their student body, if it happens to be a district with more than just one school. So I think it's important that we not be compared to school districts that have one school, because when that's the circumstance, you can spread it out over the whole week, because you can just keep coming back day after day to finish or capture the testing that's completed. In our case, we have 21 schools. So if you think about the team of people that would be required to go and implement individualized testing, it would take too many staff members that the contractors we're using don't have at their disposal. And so that's where pooled testing comes in, to be able to do a scan of the entire district in 1 week, and then come back, because I do want to remind the public, the intent of the pooled testing is to identify asymptomatic possible COVID positive individuals, and then come back and determine those positive individuals. And the research will tell you that it's an extremely effective process in terms of reducing COVID spread. And I will do a programming note. We did publish just a few minutes ago our 4-week new COVID cases document. So all of our families got that via email. That document is linked to the YouTube live stream that we held last night. It is also linked to the Safe air quality website that we maintain, as well as a safe reopening that we put together. And then I'll save the rest of my remarks for the agendized items. So thank you, President Chin.
Actually, before you end, would you mind commenting on the distance learning? Because
Yes.
From my understanding, right, we're not allowed by the state to have distance
That's right.
learning. We have independent study.
That's
So the comment about Palo Alto is probably not correct, but would you mind elaborating, please?
I will. And so this is another example where I think through word of mouth, there are many instances where there's a belief that some school districts are implementing distance learning. And I want to make it clear that the decision that districts throughout the state, including San Mateo Foster City School District, made this year to implement independent study is based on the requirement to implement independent study and not to implement distance learning. The framework for reopening schools for 2021, 2022 is built around the idea of keeping children in-person instruction to the greatest extent possible. And for that reason, the state developed an independent study program for this year to provide an avenue for families that wanted a non-in-school option, recognizing that the focus is to try to create in-person options that draw as many families into school as possible. At last count, we were up at about 80 students district-wide out of 10,600. So again, it's an extremely small percentage of students. And our program complies with the requirements, and it is similar to those in districts throughout the peninsula and really throughout the state. I'll hold off on commenting on any one district in particular, because I haven't spent enough time on every single one to speak to the specifics of it. But what I can say is that distance learning has changed fundamentally in every district throughout the state of California for 21-22.
Thank you, Superintendent Choa. I mean, just to go a little step further, we're just not allowed to do distance learning as it was last year. So moving on to our proposed consent agenda. Let's see, all items on the consent agenda are considered by the board to be routine and will be enacted by the board in one motion in the form listed below. There will be no discussion on these items prior to the time the board votes on the motion unless members of the board, staff, or public request specific items be removed and discussed from the consent agenda. The superintendent and staff recommend approval of all consent items. Movement of any recommended consent item is appropriate at this time. Does any member of the board want to pull an item on the consent agenda?
I don't want to pull or discuss, but I do want to highlight the fact that we have special education settlements so far for the month of September, excuse me, totaling $238,800.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Warren. Does anyone else want to? Okay, Peter, would you mind asking the public to see if there's any member who wants to pull an item on the consent agenda, please?
Absolutely. If there's any member of the public that would like to pull a consent agenda item, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom now, and I will request that you give me which agenda item you would like pulled from the consent. Okay, we have Randy. Randy, which item would you like pulled from the consent agenda?
The issues with the settlements and the NPS, NPA contracts.
So is that item 5.1.1 and item 5.1.2 and item 5.1.3, or is there any particular?
Yeah, and I think, sorry, I just closed that window out. I think 5.1.4. Yeah, and 5.1.5. Yeah.
So is it, I'm sorry, just clarification, did you want to make comment on all the 5.1s?
Yeah, how about 5.1 at all?
Okay. Okay. President Chen?
Okay, thank you. We are pulling items 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4. I'm sorry, 5.1.1, 5.1.2, 5.1.3, 5.1.4, and 5.1.5. Does anyone want to make a motion on the other consent agenda items for approval?
I motion to approve items, well, all items with the exception of the 5 listed under 5.1.
A second.
Thank you, Trustee Corzo for the motion, Trustee Watkins for the motion, for the second. Roll call vote, Trustee Corzo.
Yes.
Trustee Proctor,
Yes.
Trustee Watkins,
Yes.
Trustee Warren,
Yes.
and I will vote yes as well. So we have now effectively approved the consent agenda, except for all items listed as 5.1. They are all related, but they're individually agendized. So we will treat them all individual as they are. So 5.1.1. Do we have any comments or questions, or should we just, is there a discussion or some sort of intro for them?
Thank you. So item 5.1.1 is a ratification of 21-22 extended school year non-public agency or NPA and non-public school or NPS contracts. The district provides services for individual special education students according to commitments made in the student's individual education plan, IEP. And when those services are not available through district programs, the district contracts with an NPA or an NPS. And listed are the contracts for the 21-22 extended school year in the amount of $23,321 for NPS or for NPA and $8,090 for NPS.
Thank you, Superintendent Choa. Anyone have any clarifying questions?
President Chen,
Yes.
could we take a 2-minute pause? Our technology on the Zoom feed is sort of experiencing a problem. We just kind of stay right where we are. Yeah.
Why don't we, yes, we will take a slight recess at the moment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, President Chen, are you able to hear me?
We can now.
Okay, fantastic. My apologies to you, to the rest of the board and the public for my technical difficulties with Zoom. I do have control of the meeting again and we can proceed.
Thank you, Peter. And why don't we return everybody to, we will return to our meeting following that short technical difficulty recess. And we're on consent item 5.1, asking for board member clarifying questions. Anyone have any clarifying questions? No? Okay.
Yeah, I just have one. Those of us who know autism therapy, we can recognize the names of some of these services. There were a couple that I couldn't recognize in terms of like what services we are paying for. So like what service does PALS provide? So I mean, that's just, I'd like to understand better what all the services that we're paying out for and we're contracting for. With the autism therapy companies that I recognize, I do count up 28 students that we are providing some sort of behavioral support. What sort of behavioral support are we paying for? Are we paying for BCBAs? Are we paying for behavior techs to serve as aides and paras in the classroom? I just like a little bit more clarification as to what we're paying for.
So I'll turn it over to our Director of Special Ed, Alma. Ms. Ellis, if you could respond to that question.
Good evening. Good evening. PALS is providing behavioral support, and we are providing behavioral technician support as part of the services that they provide.
So then all of these companies, Spectrum, TLC, Keo, ALP, Trumpet, and PALS are all providing behavioral technicians?
Yes.
And they're being supervised by what BCBA?
A clinical supervisor.
Is that a staff member or is that somebody from their own agency?
Somebody from their own agency.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any other clarifying questions? No? Okay, we'll go to public comment on this item. Please, Peter.
Yes, absolutely. Randy, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. So the question, so I have a suggestion and a question on this. The suggestion is, there's some great PDFs that accompany this, and how I assume the CBO or the director of finance is starting to document this, that are improvements over how this was done in years past. What I would suggest is there a way that this could be shown cumulatively over the school year, how these numbers are increasing for the NPSs and NPAs in a similar spirit to how for the budgets for Measure X, Measure T, how he's showing the spend down for those budgets? Could he, with respect to a school year, show how these costs are increasing with each of these contracts as they're getting added on to the total year spend? And then my other question is, well, that's my suggestion. And the question is, what budget line item are these NPAs and NPSs covered onto for this 5.1? If you can answer that, if not, I understand. Thanks.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, President Chen.
Great, thank you for that comment. But before we go to board member comments and discussion, we do have members of the public in the audience. And usually per our a previous time that we had members in the public, we will ask for public comment for those in attendance first, and then we'll move to online. So I see a shake in the head. We actually have 2 people, but no, okay. So no public comment from the public here in the audience. So I will officially close public comment on 5.1.1 and return to the board for comments and or vote.
I can go ahead and make a comment. I think it's great that we have 28 students being supported by behavior technicians. Students with autism, need varying levels of support. So I'm glad that we are staffing accordingly. I also know how difficult it is to get BTs around here. I think every single agency is struggling, whether you contract with them for your insurance or through your insurance, or whether the school district's contracting with the companies. They're a diamond in the rough and they're hard to find. My concern is that these behavior technicians are being supervised by their own BCBAs when we have a BCBA on staff with the school district. We have a coordinator that is in charge of running our behavior programs. So I'm just a little confused with the hierarchy and how that org chart would work. Because in my mind, these BTs are contracted to work for us. So they should be supervised by that particular BCBA in my mind. So I just don't fully understand how that works. But yeah, I mean, we need to give our students the support that they need so that they can be successful in the least restrictive environment.
Great, thank you, Trustee Warren. Does anyone else want to make a comment?
Yeah, I like the idea of being a little bit more transparent and maybe creating a schedule that we can look at ongoing. maybe in terms of dollars and in terms of students. And then that would be a tool that we could use to compare next year to see how things are going, just in terms of like how much we're spending on some of these outside agencies. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for those comments. Does anybody have any other comments, or does anyone want to make a motion on this item?
A motion to approve this item.
A second.
Thank you, Trustee Corzo for the motion and Trustee Proctor for the second. So we'll do a roll call vote on item 5.1.1. Trustee Corzo,
Yes.
Trustee Proctor,
Yes.
Trustee Watkins,
Yes.
Trustee Warren,
Yes.
and I will vote yes as well. So that has passed 5-0. We're moving on to item 5.1.2, which is also related to MPS. Superintendent Ochoa.
Thank you, President Chin. Item 5.1.2 is the approval of the 2021-2022 non-public school or NPS contracts. The district provides services for individual special education students according to commitments made in those plans. When those services are not able to be provided through district programs, the district contracts with a non-public school for those services, and listed are the contracts for the 2021-2022 school year. The recommendation from administration is that we approve the non-public school contracts in the amount of $71,379. And with that, I will open for any questions.
Thank you. Any board member clarifying questions on this item? No? Okay, we will go to public comment, but Peter, since I know you're in another room, I'll ask the public members in the audience first if they'd like to speak. No? Okay, Peter, would you mind asking members online if they would like to participate, please?
Absolutely. If there's any members of the public that would like to make comment on this particular item, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom. Okay, we have no hands for public comment, President Chen.
Thank you. I will officially close public comment on item 5.1.2. Does anyone want to have any further discussion or would like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve item 5.1.2.
I'll second.
Thank you, Trustee Proctor for the motion, Trustee Watkins for the second. Roll call vote. Trustee Corzo,
Yes.
Trustee Proctor,
Yeah.
Trustee Watkins,
Yes.
Trustee Warren,
Yes.
and I will vote yes as well. So item 5.1.2 has passed. Moving on to item 5.1.3. Superintendent Ochoa.
Thank you, President Chin. Item 5.1.3 is a request for approval for the 2021-2022 non-public agency or NPA contracts. The district provides services for individual special education students according to commitments made in those IEP meetings. When appropriate services are not able to be provided through district programs, the district contracts with a non-public agency or NPA for those services. Listed in this attachment are those contracts for the 2021-2022 school year. And it is recommended that the board approve these non-public, there's a typo in there, but non-public agency contracts in the amount of $2,495,034.38. So if the board were to consider this motion, I'd ask that you make that correction and indicate non-public agency as opposed to non-public school. And with that, I will turn it over to the board for any questions.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions from the board? No? Okay. I will open public comment and start with the audience members first. No? No, thank you. Okay. Peter, would you mind calling for those online, please?
Absolutely. Any members of the public that would like to make comment on this item, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom now. Okay, we have two. Amy, go ahead. After Amy will be Randy. Amy?
Hi, thank you. This is Amy Fickenshire, parent to 2 kids in the district and the CDAC chair. And as we're discussing this, it just makes me want to make sure that we're considering why the district is contracting with outside agencies for these needs. I think it is fantastic that kids' needs are being met and that the district is, of course, following the IEPs and providing what kids need. But is it hiring? Is it retention? Is it compensation for these positions? Is it training? There's all of these other aspects that lead us to where we are for these for the necessity of these outside agencies. So, you know, we're hearing a lot about the money that's being spent, but there's also a discussion to be had about why it needs to be spent in the first place. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Next is Randy. Randy, go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak again, and I appreciate Amy Fickenshire's comments before. That really speaks to the spirit of that the special ed audit was made, and really what motivates me to ask these questions about this in the first place. So following up on the comment that I made earlier, again, I think it would be really beneficial for you, the board, for the district generally, for the community more broadly, for transparency, to be able to see not only as these dollars and cents are adding up and attributing them to services for students and to providers of those services, but also to then go back retroactively and take a look over the past 1, 2, 3 years and see kind of what that track record is and how we're tracking. We should have those data, right? I mean, we have these budgets, we should have those data. And is this something that can, you know, we have those data, can we produce that? So that's my first point. Second point goes back to the budget. Which line item does this fall under? Is this general fund? Is this special education funds? Where is this coming from? I don't see that necessarily on the documentation that comes with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, President Chin, we have no other hands for public comment.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to officially close public comment on item 5.1.3. Would anyone like to have any discussion about this or make a motion with Superintendent Ochoa's correction? Any comments, discussion? Yeah, go for it. Trustee Moore.
So I think Amy brings up a really good point. We have roughly 1,100 students within our special education program, and many of those kids are on IEPs, and the IEPs have within them services that need to be rendered. And if we don't render those services, the IEPs are not compliant. So I agree with Amy, and, you know, yay, we're able to find companies that can give us people to help deliver these services that these students need to be able to, I mean, not even, you know, just like be better, but just access their education. I mean, we're talking, you know, when you talk IEP language, you generally talk in terms of like, I want my child to like function in a gen ed setting. You're not talking about like, I want them to go to Harvard. So we're talking about being able to access one's education, which is a civil right. So on one hand, I am incredibly grateful that we have these contracts available. On the other hand, almost $2.5 million is a lot of money to be spending and giving to outside agencies. I understand that there will always be some level of need for outside agencies, but some of these positions I would love to see us starting to fill internally. You know, like I would love if we have a special ed coordinator in charge of behavior services, I would love to start seeing us having our own internal behavior technicians. To me, that just is a natural, you know, just a natural part of that. You know we need speech language pathologists. And yes, I understand that we do have pipelines in the works, and that's great, but we need to have more of our own so that we're not spending the extra money on these outside agencies and having to create these contracts. But the flip side is that, yay, we're getting the kids the services that they need, and we're not out of compliance necessarily in terms of not being able to get them the services.
I know we've had conversations in the past about our NPA and NPS agreements. And so this is actually just making me wonder with some of the public comment and board comment, just wondering if it might make sense to, and we can add this in future requests for future agenda items, but actually to agendize, digging in deeper to kind of some of the numbers here, the budgets here, the and just, you know, kind of the systems and structures that are in place. And potentially, you know, we know that there's some transition that's happened kind of, and so there might be some thinking about how we move forward. So I'm thinking instead of that, it might make sense to do that so the district's unable to bring back some additional data.
Yep, thank you for those comments. I do know that on our sort of future agenda builder, I think we are scheduled for a special education update in October. So I know that we have a sort of busier agenda next in 2 weeks, but I think in October I think we previously scheduled that a month or so ago. So, but I agree. Any other comments about this? Any other questions? Does anyone feel comfortable making a motion with Superintendent Ochoa's clarification?
I'll make a motion to approve agenda item 5.1.3 with the adjustment under the recommended motion to say non-public agency instead of non-public school.
A second.
Thank you, Trustee Watkins for the motion. Trustee Corzo for the second. Roll call vote. Trustee Corzo.
Yes.
Trustee Proctor.
Yes.
Trustee Watkins.
Yes.
Trustee Warren.
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. So that has passed. Okay, we are moving on to item 5.1.4. Superintendent Ochoa, please.
Thank you, President Chin. Item 5.1.4 is the approval of 3 special education settlement agreements. In these 3 cases, the parent in settlement 1 requested an independent educational evaluation in the areas of psychoeducational and academic achievement. The district filed for hearing. The purpose of this agreement is to resolve any and all issues regarding the student's special education program through the 2021 extended school year, at which time the student matriculated to high school. In settlement 2, the parents unilaterally placed student in a private school, and the district maintains that it offered student a free and appropriate public education. The purpose of the agreement is to resolve any and all issues regarding the student's special education to date. In settlement 3, parents unilaterally placed student in a private school, and the district maintains that it offered student a free and appropriate public education. The purpose of this agreement is to resolve any and all issues regarding the student's special education through the 2021 extended school year, at which time the student will matriculate to high school. Administration recommends that the board approve the settlement agreements in the amount not to exceed $133,800. And with that, I will open for any questions from the board.
Any clarifying questions from the board? See none. I'm going to open public comment to the members of the public in the audience. Thank you. Thank you for attending, and thank you for shaking your head. So I know, at least I know, instead of you waving me off. Peter, would you mind opening public comment for those online, please?
Absolutely. Any members of the public that would like to make comment on this item, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom now. Okay, we have Randy. Randy, go ahead.
Hi, good evening again. So this settlements, now this is a completely different issue, right? These are people that have either threatened to litigate, have gone to litigation. This is like some sort of like legal payout, right? That you, the board members, have approved. So this is a separate thing that I think would be really, really useful to see as, once again, a cumulative summary by year and to see it adding up. And also to see this retroactively. How much of this have we paid out last year, the year before, the year before? And the thing that's really important about this, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that this comes out of general fund. And so what goes into general fund? Well, you know, Measure V, which I supported, campaigned for, right? This is $9 million a year. How much did you approve last year to have paid out? 9 million. You asked voters and you got voters to pay into general fund. How much of that went out into settlements because the district wasn't getting things done right? Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. President Chin, we have no other hands for public comment.
Thank you. I'm going to officially close public comment on item 5.1.4 and opening up for board discussion and or motion, if any. Does anybody have any comments on this item? Or does anyone want to make a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion to approve 5.1.4.
Thank you, Trustee Proctor. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Trustee Watkins. Roll call vote. Trustee Corzo.
Yes.
Trustee Proctor.
Yes.
Trustee Watkins.
Yes.
Trustee Warren.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. Okay, moving on to our last consent agenda item that has been pulled and is up for a vote tonight, which is item 5.1.5. Superintendent Ochoa.
Thank you, President Chin. Item 5.1.5 is the approval of one special education settlement agreement. In this case, the student is an 8th grade student residing in the district and attending a private school for students with special needs. Parents allege that the district denied student a free and appropriate public education, or FAPE, from the 2019-20 school year to the present. This agreement constitutes a full and final resolution of all claims and issues arising from or related to the student's educational program and services through the end of the 2021-2022 school year, when student will matriculate to high school. It is recommended that the Board of Trustees approve the settlement agreement in the amount not to exceed $105,000. And with that, I'll open to questions.
Any clarifying questions? No, any members of the public who wants to make a public comment? No, thank you. Peter, would you mind opening up public comment online, please?
Absolutely. Any members of the public that would like to make comment on this item, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom now. Okay, Randy, go ahead.
So, yeah, just, you know, to bring up that point again, and I hope that one of you board members will request kind of this cumulative buildup of this. It just in this one settlement, $105,000. This is over 1% of a Measure V, 1 year of Measure V parcel tax that's getting paid out for one student. I think that we can do better than this. I think that the district can do better than this. As a taxpayer, I want to see my money being spent better than this. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, President Chen, we have no other hands for public comment.
Okay, thank you for those comments. I'm officially closing public comment on item 5.1.5. Does any board member want to start the discussion or make a motion? I see Trustee Warren, go for it.
It's special education. You know, I'm going to have to say something. I know when I did calculations for last year, in terms of settlements, we paid out about $3 million in settlements in special education. So far this year, we've got roughly 249,800, if I recall, that that's gone out since the beginning of the school year in August. So I do know that there is a lot of change going on within the special education department. And I'm hopeful that because of that change, we will be able to help our parents feel more comfortable with that their children will get a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment within the San Mateo Foster City School District. As a special education parent myself, and being within that community for the past 5 years, I can tell you right now that that has not been the case in terms of what other parents have voiced to me in off conversations. I am looking forward to having some of this information that Randy is asking for presented to us when we have our special education update come October. I would like to see kind of like a multi-year, how much have we spent in settlements? What have the settlements been generally for? Has it been us basically telling the parents that they don't know what they're talking about and they don't know their children, and their children are behaving perfectly when things that are coming home don't necessarily reflect that? Or is it something else? You know, I would love to have more insight, and I'm hopeful that we can get more of that insight when we get our special education update in October.
Thank you, Trustee Warren. I think I might just want to make one correction. I don't believe it was 3.5 million for the settlements. I think it was 3 million, but was it or that was the MPS MPA contracts? That was. All right, I think that would be great to clarify that in October. Any other questions, discussion items? Anyone want to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve 2.1.5.
Thank you, Trustee Watkins, for the motion. Anyone with a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Trustee Proctor. Roll call vote, Trustee Corzo.
Yes.
Trustee Proctor.
Yes.
Trustee Watkins.
Yes.
Trustee Warren.
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. Okay, we have officially approved all the items on the consent agenda. I do know Superintendent Ochoa, before we go on to actually the 6.1, do we want to make an announcement of our new hire? I'll put you on the spot.
Well, it is agendized for 8.1.
Aye, sorry.
So I'm gonna hold you off just a little bit. And if you're ready, you can turn it over to me for 6.1.
No, I apologize. Usually I look into some human resources. That's where I know we approved it, but it's on special agenda. So, okay. Before we move on to 6.1, Trustee Corzo, would you mind making the language translation announcement one more time, please?
Gracias a todos por estar presentes. Si ocupan traducción, por favor, levanten la mano. También pueden empujar el globo que ven en su pantalla para cambiar el idioma. Gracias.
Great, and thank you. As promised, I will mention that we now have 114 participants online and 2 members in the public audience. I'm very glad people are coming back to our meetings, so thank you. Okay, moving on to item 6.1, Superintendent Ochoa.
Thank you very much, President Chin. I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. Let me just zoom in a little bit. What you have this evening is a presentation regarding a conversation and an idea that would greatly increase the public's access to be able to discuss issues of concern with the school board in a setting that rotates throughout our community on an ongoing basis throughout the year. And the intent of this presentation is to achieve more community engagement from a broader group of stakeholders. So I'm going to take you through that. This is for the board's consideration this evening, and then ultimately your direction at the end of this presentation. So we are a large district. We are 21 schools strong, over approximately 11,000 students, many families in areas that are geographically unique and also not very close to one another. You know, where our district office is located is actually far away from Highlands. It's actually far away from Park School. So, you know, we're a unique district in that way. Not all districts are like that. And so what my idea about how to bridge that gap is to have a conversation about how our board meetings operate. And these board meetings are a place for the public to be able to observe and comment on and engage in the work that the school district is requesting that the board approve and authorize, and to create a venue for the public to inspect our budgets and to inspect our hiring, and to really sort of keep their finger on the pulse of the sort of when the gavel hits the table, you know, what decision was made. At that same time, as you can see, board meetings are, you know, they tend not to take place in a physical location where a representative group of the community can actually show up. We currently have about 40 chairs. If we even just had 2 people from each school attending, we'd reach our capacity pretty quickly. Anything more than that, we'd need a different space to physically hold an in-person meeting. And the public, as you know, is offered an opportunity to address the board on any agenda items, and actually on non-agenda items as well. I think over the last year, the board has gone over or discussed the concept of how long we should take public comment on any one given item. During the pandemic, a decision was made to waive any of those timelines. And so on some cases, there were, you know, in some cases, hours of public comment relating to even just one item. That tends not to be the case all the time. It tends to be more like 2 or 3 comments per item. But there are limitations on that, and it's typically 3 minutes, right? When those time limits are implemented, you have to ask, like, have you ever tried to give a reasonable, thoughtful statement in less than 3 minutes? It's actually hard to do when it's a complicated topic. So it leads to the question of what's missing. And that's where it comes to the idea of two-way communication. When members of the public comment in school board meetings, we have a very structured process to receive that comment. And it does not involve a back and forth exchange between school board members and members of the public. In what I would recommend the board consider a board and community workshop, the agenda is set collaboratively. School board members are able to say, I would really like to discuss these topics, and members of the public who choose to participate show up and say, well, I have my own ideas. I've got some things I'd like to talk about. In a board and community workshop, there are no votes. No vote is being taken on behalf of the board. And consequently, there's no decision being made at that meeting, but rather it is designed to give parents a chance to just let board members hear directly from them in an unfiltered way. When you hold a public board meeting, people know that their comments are being heard, and in the case of Zoom meetings, they're actually being broadcast. And that dissuades people from participating because they don't want to be recorded and they don't want their comments to be part of the public record. So they just opt to not participate because they say, I don't want to be on TV. And it's the first time you stand up in front of a school board, it's actually kind of scary. Your heart races, you feel nervous. Even when you go up to say something good, you get a little bit nervous, and that's very different than what a board and community workshop could be, which is more of a conversation, more of a dinner type of setting conversation. In a board and community workshop, parents can actually send in questions in advance, so that the principal and superintendent can create a frequently asked question before the meeting. So I would recommend that we consider creating a living document that gives attendees an opportunity to say, when you show up, be prepared to talk to us about this question that I have. And then that way we put our minds together, our brains together, and we come up with some talking points and some ideas that we can share with the public. In addition to that, in a board and community workshop, parents can meaningfully attend, again, once we're in person due to the district, being able to offer dinner so that people can attend a lengthy meeting and not feel like, in our case, we're sort of sneaking away to get something to eat, but also these meetings go on for hours and hours in some cases. And then it puts us in a position to be able to provide free childcare on site for families that require it, as well as translation services in the languages that serve our communities. Down below, you see some pictures of the different types of mitigation strategies, the HEPA air filters, the symptom checking, the wearing masks, the hand sanitizing, and then initially, just due to the Delta variant, starting off in a Zoom setting. And then what I did for the board is just create a sample calendar. And what you see on here is just an example of where some of these meetings might fit. I do want to let the board know we have a very busy monthly calendar when you add in the Special Education District Advisory Committee, the District English Language Advisory Committee, our multiple task forces that take place, our school board meetings that take place, as well as site meetings that take place, things like back to school nights and parent teacher conferences, and these things do add up. Not to mention just wanting to hold a meeting on a night when you think families will show up, so you tend not to do like a Friday night type of thing. So these are simply placeholder meeting dates. But the intent here, and it really, President Chin, it came from several conversations you and I had about wanting to really engage with the community. And I believe that this is an effective path for school board members and members of the public to engage with each other. And with that, I will open for any questions from the board.
Great, thank you, Superintendent Ochoa. Open up for board clarifying questions. This is an informational item, so there's no action, but we still will go with clarifying questions, public comment, and then board discussion. Anyone have any clarifying questions for Superintendent Ochoa?
I just have a question that I think can kind of help the community get a little more insight into like next steps, right? So this is like a proposed calendar, what the intention is, and then once we have those dates set, then the agenda topics for those meetings would be either community driven or based on our requests, correct?
That's correct. And there are members of the public who, when told that an event like this would take place and that 2 school board members would attend, the idea behind 2 is that then it doesn't become a required agendized Brown Act meeting, because again, that's what you want to, in my opinion, my recommendation to the board is you want to leave it at 2 school board members attending as opposed to all 5 attending at any given time. But when folks find that out, they say, oh, I want to go to that meeting, and I know just what to tell them. Creating a venue for people to submit comments in advance, I think helps us to be prepared. But you know what? Some folks are also going to show up and say, you know what? I'm going to tell them there when I get there what's on my mind. And that's where you see that genuine engagement happening.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions? Okay. I'm going to open up public comment to those in the audience first. No, okay. Oh, do you want to be on record and come up to the podium? Okay. For those, I'll just repeat, we heard someone say that that would be a great idea. And a thumbs up, thank you. So Peter, would you mind opening up public comment for those online, please?
Peter's having a bit of technical difficulty. I'm gonna try it myself, Peter. Let's see here. I can't do it. Let's see here. Before Peter gets back online and allows these folks to comment, and we do have Marcella McCollum and Olivia that are raising their hands. So Olivia and Marcella, you will we'll tap into you in just a few minutes, as well as Randy with the hand raised. Our control center is.
And I think Trustee Warren, you might have had some in the past year, maybe Trustee Proctor, and have those more formalized at the sort of board level to actually have true sort of engagement. And if I, please tell me when he's back on so I can stop talking.
He's not back on yet.
So the other idea was that as we've had conversations, is the idea is that we'd probably go by complexes and we would go to the public rather than everyone come. Now, as Superintendent Ochoa has mentioned, we are in a location here in Foster City that is not easily able to get to in person, especially with the old commute traffic patterns and 92, everyone going across the bridge. And so the idea is that we would come to the public themselves and probably base it off of complexes. And for those who don't know what we mean by complexes, we talk about the middle school and the feeder schools that go to that middle school. So as example for the Abbott complex, as we call it, the Abbott complex, it's Laurel, Fiesta Gardens,
Beresford.
Beresford. I'm sorry, what?
And I think
Yeah,
Peter is
yeah.
back in now.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
Can I ask one question before
Yeah.
we move on? I just thought of something. So in terms of these meetings, it's great that we're doing this, but I was wondering, how do we report back? Because if there's only 2 of us that can go, will it be at a board meeting? And then the public that's not able to attend, maybe they'd like to hear what was discussed as well. So how does the loop close and get back to us?
We do always have board member reports. I am also my plan is to be at these meetings and to be able in my superintendent's report to report on those as well. I think what one of the benefits the board will see from this process is you're hearing directly from a lot of parents, not 6 parents or 7 parents or 10. You'll hear from, in the span of a year, hundreds of parents, and that tends not to be the case all the time, where you're genuinely having conversations. So I think it's kind of a situation where it's more like you're getting that information feed more regularly from a broader range of folks who would typically contact you. And then one process we could use is to come back to school board meetings and just report generally on the topics discussed. All right, Peter, you're up.
Again, my apologies to the board, to you, superintendent, and the members of the public. Currently, we have 2 hands for public comment. Randy, go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I thought someone was ahead of me. So first of all, I just wanted to say this is such a great idea, and it is so generous of the superintendent to offer up his time. And if the board members agree to do this, this is also very generous of your time as well. I mean, this is a lot of extra time that is being requested of you, and I hope will be time really well spent. I believe it will. And I really appreciate the effort to make yourselves available to the public and the families in this way. And the superintendent just laid it out so beautifully. And I think that this is really authentic engagement in a way that you wouldn't be able to get in this format. And I speak up a lot, but every time that I do, I'm still nervous. I have sweaty hands right now. And this is somebody that, pipes up and speaks up a lot. And it's just, I know it's so nerve-wracking. And if there's so many other barriers that can get in the way. And I love this idea. So thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Next, we have Marcella. Marcella, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I want to just express gratitude for putting in a system that is going to support two-way conversation. I had internet issues, so I missed the last little chunk of what was said. So I may have missed this clarification, but based on the presentation, it looked like there would be a principal at each meeting. And so my question is this geared at one meeting per school, or will each month be a district-wide meeting? Just making sure or thinking about how much accessibility is created in that space. And I think that opportunity to contribute or discuss is key. And then the only other thing that I was suggesting was potentially time of day and accessibility. I love the dinner and childcare. I think that's key. But I also think that there are families that are not able to make it in the evening, even if childcare and dinner is provided. So some other avenue would be helpful there. But I am overjoyed at this direction of two-way communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella. Next, we have Stephen, and after Stephen will be Eric. Stephen, go ahead.
Hey, board. I think this is a really phenomenal idea. You know, I think through the pandemic, you've heard a lot of frustration from questions and miscommunication that I think this really could address head on. And I want to echo the earlier comments about your generosity and how fantastic it is that you would do this. I just had one brief suggestion, which is that perhaps some of the events could be focused primarily on other languages besides English, perhaps Spanish or other languages that might increase engagement with some communities that tend to not always be represented at these meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Next, we have Eric. Eric, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. As someone who calls into almost every board meeting, but almost never speaks because I hate public speaking, I will also add my voice in support for this. This is fantastic and it would be amazing and great for community engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. President Chen, we have no other hands for public comment.
Okay, thank you everybody for providing your comments. I'm officially closing public comment on this item and bringing it back for the board for discussion. This is not an action item, but I'm sure Superintendent Ochoa would love your opinions and discussion. Who would like to start?
I can jump in. I mean, I think echoing what a lot of public shared, I think it's a great idea and a great, one piece of kind of the communication efforts. I think that there's been a lot of increased communication with the community. And so this provides us with another opportunity to do that, which I think is great. I guess I echo some of the suggestions that were made in terms of, can we have some that are offered, similar to LCAP engagement, which we had a Spanish engagement, and where instead of where the translation is to English. And so just, considering that as we're planning these, I think that's a wonderful suggestion. I also agree. I wonder about, I don't know how complicated it is, or, if there's like a really easy like survey that could be sent around great times of day, days of weeks, just to get like a pulse on what would be best. Because I mean, to Marcella's point, there might be other times of day that are better for people. I think potentially weekends, I don't know. And so it might be helpful just to get a pulse. I don't think we're going to meet everybody's scheduling needs, but if we just get a sense from the community in terms of like, these are the top 3 days and times, and then we can kind of build our schedule around that, I think would be helpful. But otherwise, I'm looking forward to it.
I'll just say the same as what Trustee Watkins said. I'm really excited about this. I really love the way that the direction that our district is going in. Thanks to Superintendent Ochoa with all of the YouTube lives and the coffee chats and everything that you've been doing, and that I'm glad that we can participate and continue to provide some more area or ways that people can be engaged and just provide transparency and access to everybody. So I'm excited for this.
I'll also just share my support for this. I'm excited about it. I think that, you know, we have our board meetings and we have a lot to get through, and, you know, even it's basically just like the format of these meetings. It doesn't provide for that back and forth engagement. And, you know, sometimes, especially now while we're here in person, we have masks on, it's like kind of difficult to gauge like body language. And I mean, that would be the same in person in these other meetings, but, you know, to be safe. But I'm excited just about the ability to have more back and forth conversation and make things more accessible and more open and transparent. I know that, you know, we all care deeply about all of the issues in our district and all the families and all the students. And there's also a lot of good things to celebrate in our district. So I'm excited to really dig into all of that. I think board meetings sometimes can take a more just like a more stern tone, right? Like we're trying to get through business, and sometimes, you know, we miss the opportunities to celebrate like the really good things happening, although that is happening now in our district, just not in this space, right? So I do like the idea of making these consistent and part of our community engagement. And I know that we're all more than willing to do this and to, you know, to connect with our families and even, you know, just our community members that aren't necessarily parents in our school district. And I'm happy to do some in Spanish.
I also want to just lend my support to this this idea, and I would love to see this come about. I just feel like we could learn so much from the parents of the students in our district, just as we can share so much with them as well. So I just look forward to having that two-way conversation as opposed to basically the public watching us hold the meeting. So I look forward to seeing how this works out.
I had one thought that, oh, sorry. I had one thought that just came to mind, which is just around more logistical pieces. So I'm wondering if we can have these outdoors at our school sites versus inside, especially if people are eating. Because I'm thinking about just, you know, the things that the measures that we take at our schools with students, and not knowing what of that will be transferable all the way when, you know, with an indoor event. Maybe not knowing vaccination statuses and things like that. So I think it would just make sense maybe with a large gathering of a group of adults, if we can be outside, that would be ideal.
Great, thank you everyone for your comments. My one piece to add, besides my ramble on when we have technical difficulties, is that, you know, if the public doesn't realize, I mean, we are allowed to be on Zoom because of a, what is it, emergency order that allows us to, as an exception to the Brown Act. But at some point, our Zoom online thing will end, along with all the other cities and school districts in the state. And so how do we go ahead and communicate with the public when we've basically learned that the public does want to communicate with us in sometimes different ways now? And Zoom wasn't set up for that. So I think this is a great step in the right direction. The one thing I would add, Superintendent Ochoa, is that there's a number of logistics that are needed. And if we do go by the tentative schedule and maybe have the first one on October 27th, it might be great to have either at the next meeting or we have a meeting in October before to actually go over some logistics and sort of publicize it a little bit more, just to make sure we can clarify whether what dates and times, you know, outdoor, indoor, food, you know, childcare, all the sort of barriers to attending these meetings. So be great to have an update at some point so that we can tell the public.
Well, one opportunity that's in front of us now, President Chin, is we have a number of different parents who attend these meetings who we can reach out to, but as well as over the last few weeks, we've reached out to families to participate in our We Are One SMFC campaign. And so we're in daily contact with those families, scheduling the photo shoots for their children and learning about their story as students in our district. So that's a group that we could actually reach out to with a survey to be able to gauge some questions and find out, you know, if we held a meeting at your local middle school, what time of day would work for you? What would you need for it? Would you require translation? I do want to, you know, let the board know the 80 or so individuals who responded via email to opt into the We Are One SMFC program. They're extremely diverse in terms of language, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of schools attended. I think 17 out of the 21 schools are represented district-wide in terms of people who responded to that email. So we have a nice group of families that we're sort of already in daily contact with, and we might send a quick survey to them to gauge some more feedback, and I can bring an update to our next meeting on the 23rd. And the dates that we sent out are placeholders. So what we'll do is send all of the board basically a calendar, a doodle that gives board members an opportunity to indicate what dates work best, and then go through the process of identifying by complex what dates we would assign to make sure that, because basically if we do this for 11 months of the year, and I would recommend we take at least 1 month off, but in December, you'll actually be able to do multiple meetings throughout the year within the same complex, which is a really nice way to circle back to topics that were discussed, you know, at any given place.
Fantastic. Thank you, Superintendent Choa. With that, unless there's any further comments on this, we're going to move on to our next item. That's just item 6.2, which is our air quality preparation and response.
Thank you very much for that, President Chen. I appreciate that. Give me a second here. All right, thank you. There we go. Tonight's presentation is a presentation in which we're going to look at an air quality guidance table. We're going to look at air quality guidance, language and document, and then review some criteria as it pertains to our school district. I'm going to share my screen again, so it'll just take me a second here to put that together. While I do that, I have our Chief Business Official, Patrick Gaffney, who I want to commend for spending the time with me last night to hold a YouTube live town hall. We were able to have about 150 individual viewers of that event live. And what's really great about the YouTube live town hall process is that they can then actually watch it afterward. So since that aired, we have tripled the number of viewers that were watching live, which is really great. And if you go back to previous YouTube live town halls, where we had, I think, who was with me that night? The very first one we had, I think we had about 600 live viewers, but we're up to 2,000 views. So it just shows sort of over time, the content is viewed at people's convenience. And I think that just increases communication. So with that, I am going to take the board through this quick presentation. Let's see here. All right. And we'll start with this visual. This is a visual that shows statewide air quality activity recommendations. And what it indicates is if and when there's an air quality event where you see air quality worsening throughout the school day, they're giving recommendations for how to mitigate or change student activity according to 4 different criteria. The first is recess. We have 21 schools in this district. Our elementary schools are all doing recess multiple times a day. At our middle schools, we have breaks and we have lunch, which is a form of recess. All of our schools either offer PE at the elementary level, or our middle school students take PE. And we are looking to kickstart our athletic programs in 2 weeks, as well as having scheduled sporting events in the future as well. So when there's positive air quality, good air quality, there are no restrictions. When it reaches what they're determining is level 2, it requires that individuals who are require medically managed conditions be aware that the air quality is worsening. When it reaches level 3, those individuals with sensitive conditions, they should avoid vigorous outdoor activities. To use the example of practice, the language there indicates reducing vigorous exercise to 30 minutes per hour of practice time with increased rest breaks and substitutions. So as an athletics coach, when your team is put together and you are working with that team after school, you have medical cards for every student. So you know who might have a condition such as a bad case of asthma that would place them in this group of sensitive individuals. Now, when it gets to level 4, what it indicates is that it's not only for individuals who are sensitive, but it's for everyone. Exercise indoors or avoiding vigorous outdoor activities. And then in level 4, you can see there, sensitive individuals should remain indoors completely. And so you start to see those mitigations appear for non-sensitive individuals or the typical student. And then you start to see those mitigations become more restrictive for individuals who have sensitive conditions. The one kind of bad side of this visual is it doesn't give you the numbers for air quality index. So it's sort of helpful in one way to see the mitigation change as the levels change, but it doesn't correlate to the numbers that we're all seeing on the many systems we use to check air quality. So that's what I'm going to switch to next. So here what you have is much more clear in terms of how the numbers equate to what you might determine as the levels. So San Mateo County is in the Bay Area Air Management Quality District. That cohort or grouping of communities are all tied into a system of air quality index scores. And the air quality is reported according to this scale, which goes from green to yellow, orange, red, purple, and brown. In terms of keeping track of the air quality, we discussed this over the last 2 weeks internally in the district among staff, because there are many, many ways to track air quality. And we've landed on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, which ties to the EPA's AirNow website. And the reason fundamentally was because of the reported accuracy of that content, recognizing that it isn't the fastest or most immediate of the different air quality indexes that are available online. What I want to point to the board here is you see this range going from green all the way to brown. And then you start to see the language that's being given to school districts, because again, this is a document that is shared with school districts by the County Office of Education and the Coalition for Safe Schools and Communities. And so what you start to see where it gets to school response is when air quality dips to very unhealthy levels, or the purple 201 to 300, many schools in San Mateo County will practice the shelter-in-place protocol, which includes keeping all activities indoors, limiting physical activity, and minimizing the opening and closing of doors. Now, in a typical year, say 2 years ago or 3 years ago, you look at those strategies and you say, I get that. But we are in the middle still of a pandemic in which our district's health and safety response is tied very closely to the idea of opening doors and windows, having air coming in from the exterior, and having mitigation strategies on campus that we want students to be outdoors in the fresh air, because that obviously is proven to have a relationship to a reduction in transmission of the coronavirus. So this is one of those school years where we have an additional challenge being placed on top of air quality. What this document indicates is that if air quality becomes hazardous or brown in the brown section, and schools do not have an ability to keep outdoor air from easily entering the school, then a school may decide to close. So what this presentation is about, and what I'm bringing to the board's attention, is a concern that I have that 301 is a fairly high number. I mean, the definition of that range is hazardous. And when you pull the definition for very unhealthy, that definition, as far as I'm concerned as a father and as an educator, that standard meets my sort of requirements, just me personally as superintendent of the district, to say, I'm very concerned about air quality, and I think we should consider campus closure because of the harm that can take place regarding students being on campus when the air quality is that poor. In addition to, and this is discussed in this presentation that I give to the board, but and I'll take you through it now. So how we monitor air quality is student services officials monitor daily air quality conditions multiple times a day. In the morning, at noon, and then actually once again at the after school hours, so we can make determinations about air quality for the following day. Again, we use Air Now and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. This is an example of what one of those readings looks like over time. Again, correlated to that color coding. This is an example of what steps can be taken when air quality index enters the unhealthy range, which is doors and windows would be shut. Send the central system's circulating fan to operate on rather than on auto, which is basically you take the air in your room and you just move it around. And then using a portable air cleaner, board members and our members of the public can see they're plugged into the wall. We've got multiple units in here. When air quality improves, even temporarily, air out the buildings to reduce the indoor air pollution or the particulates in the air. And then damp, mop, dust, and clean with a high efficiency particulate air HEPA filter equipped vacuum. That is something we haven't had to do because of the air conditions being what they've been for the last few months. Part of the conversation I want to have with the board this evening is how COVID and air quality intersect. And there is quite a bit of research and quite a bit of public record out there about the fact that particularly in the Western United States in 2020, when poor air quality events occurred, there is evidence that instances of the COVID transmission increased during those times. And they found a relationship between the respiratory risk of ingesting or inhaling the smoke filled air and with transmitting COVID to others around you. And so I wanted to add that to this conversation. I wanted to discuss publicly the idea that when we have articles that are published for public review, indicating that in this case, for example, fine particulate matter, air pollution can be an additional vehicle for spreading the virus even faster. And that was again in 2020 prior to the Delta variant. It's an example of content that I think we should at least discuss together. So what you're seeing next is what the recommendations look like when conditions reach certain levels. So 101 to 150 is that level that we describe as unhealthy for sensitive groups. And then this is kind of like, remember I showed the one that didn't have the specific tie-ins to the air quality index score. And what we've done here is we've actually added that on top of it. So now you're looking at those types of recommendations layered on top of those air quality index scores. So in this range, you're making the indoor space available for children with asthma or other respiratory problems. Typical type of changes for games, practices, and PE. When the air quality is unhealthy, what indicates here is any child who complains of difficulty breathing, or, so again, they sort of expanded the range there, then should be allowed to play indoors. And that's where that change in mitigation happens. And then you get to the very unhealthy range, and that in the very unhealthy range, this is sort of the sticky wicket that I'm bringing to this board's attention, which is the move statewide is the number we would use as a more general typical number to use is 301, which is hazardous. And what I'm showing you here is 201 to 300 being the description of that category is very unhealthy. So my concern and my discussion topic for the board tonight is to engage you all and open that space for us to talk about the right steps to take this year, given that we're in the middle of a pandemic and the descriptions of what it means to have very unhealthy air quality could potentially do to the health and wellness of our students. In terms of air quality activity recommendations, these are listed here again. Appropriate supervision, indoor air quality. This is important to talk about as well, because there is an equity concern that exists with any decision to forego in-person instruction. And one is that schools are a primary place where students receive needed health and counseling services. So that is something I feel we should discuss. And then the second is schools serve children food every day. And so that's something that we should also acknowledge and discuss in this space. As you saw in your agenda item, there's no clear and specific number that I'm recommending to the board at this point in time, but rather a request that this item be discussed by all of us so that we can enter our points of view into the public realm, knowing that we do have a school board meeting on the 23rd as well, coming just ahead of us. And with that, I will turn it over to the board.
Great, thank you, Superintendent Ochoa. Does any member of the board have any clarifying questions on this topic or the presentation?
I do. I have a question around it's Bay Area air quality management and AirGov. So hold on, I'm just pulling these. Okay, so when I was just looking at it, I didn't see San Mateo listed. I only saw Redwood City. Is that accurate? Okay. Because a lot of times there can be quite a bit of difference from city to city. So I have concerns about the fact that it doesn't pull from San Mateo. I also had a question on how often it's updated, because I know Air now, or I don't remember how often it was, but I know that it lags significantly behind like Purple Air, for example. So it's like updated, I think like once a day or something like that versus like, or maybe it's once an hour or something. It's like far less frequent. I also noticed, I was just like going back, I noticed that the numbers are really different from what Purple Air reports. So like, for example, this past weekend, the air quality was bad and it was in the red, and I mean, you could smell it, right? But this reports it as being yellow. So I just have a little bit of concerns about exclusively using that as our metric, given all of that. So I'd like for us to have a I mean, I guess, sorry, some of that is turning into comments. The question was, San Mateo, how often do they update it? Do you know how often they update it?
It's sorry. So what the Bay Area Air Quality Management District data is doing is they're taking in from 30 different sensors located in their jurisdiction, and they are calculating data hourly, but they are not reporting it instantly because they take their data through a process that results in a delay that is in some cases it's multiple hours of a delay. And having done some research as a result of a conversation I had relevant to Purple Air, so the two, and I'm not a scientist on this point, so I won't claim to have every detail exactly correct, but what the 30 sensors that the Air Quality Management District is using is actually bringing in particulates into their sensor and calculating, sort of capturing the amount of particulates in the air over that time frame during that hour to determine the air quality. And that is completely different than the type of sensor that is being utilized for Purple Air, which if you log into the Purple Air website or portal or system, they'll show that there are thousands. There are literally thousands of sensors throughout the Bay Area, and then in San Mateo, I haven't counted them. There are many sensors that are out there, but these are installed on individual homes, so there might be multiple air quality Purple Air sensors on a given block or in a given neighborhood, and then in other neighborhoods not as many. So I think, you know, part of what the district staff perspective is, we in San Mateo County are, by using Air Now and the Air Quality Management District, we're using the same sort of benchmark or the same source information that our county office is using and that our surrounding districts are using as well.
I think we all have comments, but I want to make sure if there are any clarifying questions.
I just have one question. I mean, we are now at essentially one-to-one Chromebooks. So, you know, taking this to distance learning can, oh, I don't want to use that word, but being able to conduct school at home when there is an air quality closure can happen. But if we're not to be distance learning, what do we call that? And what is that called? And how is that, what does that look like?
Thank you, Trustee Warren. I think you hit on a couple of things. One is the device acquisition is complete. All of the devices that the board approved a month ago have been received and been deployed. We're still waiting a little bit on a delay that we had from T-Mobile to get an additional 1,400 hotspots. So, you know, we're not there yet in terms of the hotspot usage. We're also planning to do some training for families on how to access the hotspots, because we did a review of the data that indicates how many families are actually using the hotspots, and our utilization was very low during the pandemic. So we want to fix that, and we think maybe if we show folks how to access it, that might just increase the amount of usage that we're seeing students implement. The other piece of it is, as a district, we've adopted instructional materials, namely Math Nation, Zern, and Benchmark Universe, that all transition seamlessly between in-person and online instruction. And those being the two core areas, English and math.
So I guess basically the root of my question though is that would not necessarily be considered distance learning. That would just be an emergency change of venue.
That's right. What the process is for schools in the state of California is that in a situation where there is a closure due to air quality, what typically happens is school districts tell families, we're closed for the day. We're expecting hazardous conditions, stay home. Prior to the pandemic, no district had the ability to send things home with kids for, sort of a continuation of service. And as a result, districts were required to apply for what's called a J13 waiver that is sent first to your county office, and then it's sent to the state of California to essentially leave you hold harmless for not holding that day of school. So like if you cancel the school day on November 3rd, then by applying for a J13 waiver, you're basically saying, please don't make me hold an extra day of school on a Monday on the second week of June, because that's not very fair to these kids or our employee groups or, whatever. And I think we might be going into a little bit of a different scenario now where we're saying, we have a closure, but we also have the ability to give students work to do. And that is a little bit of a different scenario because we have tools at our disposal that didn't exist before, which is the ability to give students activities, content, and instruction that would happen as a result of their using Math Nation, Zern, and Benchmark Universe, which are adopted core ELA and math materials.
I have a question, or I'm trying to word it as a question. So I don't want to, I'm not going to pretend like I'm any sort of expert in this area. So my question is, who are the experts that we're looking to help us determine when schools should close, and also whether our classrooms are safe for kids to be in during really poor air conditions? And I don't know, I think last year when we closed schools due to COVID, there was a lot of feedback that, are we listening to the experts? And now we have guidance on COVID, but what's the guidance that we look to for air quality during this time?
And thank you for asking that question, Trustee Proctor. At current conditions in the state of California, every school district is working through their regional support providers, those county offices of education, as well as the consortiums of school districts and communities that are publishing content such as the documents I showed just a few minutes ago. What we are essentially being given is recommendation and guidance to remain open until we reach that 300 air quality index score, or what is referred to as hazardous air quality conditions. I think what bears a valid conversation for us is to discuss why we would do that in a year where we know we are facing a pandemic that is partly designed in a health and safety plan that is built on the idea of bringing in external air, moving air in our classrooms, opening up doors and windows to create as much movement of air and to mitigate any risk of or to mitigate risk of COVID transmission through stagnant particulates in the air coming from a potentially asymptomatic and ill child who's in the class.
I just have a follow-up clarifying question from Trustee Warren. We're going to try and stop saying distance learning, but the issue is because we can't do distance learning. We can't do it. But what you've talked about tonight is closure of school at sort of a certain threshold, which is, I think, what we're talking about today. And I think what we all have comments on once we get to our board comments. But if we actually close school, we're in a completely different place than we were pre-pandemic. You know, I think a couple of years ago, we didn't have one-to-one device ratios to students. We didn't have hotspots. We didn't have all these things. So if we actually close schools, and this is my question, are you suggesting that we close school as if it is a complete closure? Or are you saying that are we going to have some form of at-home learning that is not distance learning, but is some form of at-home learning? That's my question.
What I'm saying is that the concern is a decision to keep schools open that is tied to the decision to reduce the introduction of outside air into our classrooms, to keep students in indoor settings. My concern is that increases the risk of COVID transmission. We happen to have tools that didn't exist before that you just discussed. Now, we have to also acknowledge that many of our employees have children. So if they're home, their kids are home. So we're going to go, actually, if you remember way back to that point where it's like, how do I teach and take care of my children at the same time? You're asking me to do something that is outside of my ability, basically. Having said that, I think the online curriculum that we have and the access to that instruction through through that curriculum based on our devices, and within, hopefully, we're thinking a week is when we'll get those additional hotspots, which will get our access percentage really increased in the district, that it basically opens up the opportunity for learning. It's not distance learning and is not a day of school, but for me, it would be access to going online and using the programs that exist and that our teachers are teaching from every day. At the same time, my understanding is that if we were to close school as a result of air quality, we would submit that J13 waiver. So technically it would be a non-school day. But if I've got 11,000 devices in households and everyone has English and math curriculum at their disposal, I always want kids to be able to go on and do something academic when they're home.
Okay, any other clarifying questions? Because I think we all have comments. Question? No, okay. All right, we're going to open up public comment on this item. Member of the public, thank you, Drew, for shaking your head. Peter, would you mind opening public comment online, please?
Absolutely. Any member of the public that would like to make comment on this particular item, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom now. Okay, first we'll have Randy, then after Randy will be Eric. Randy, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm returning this evening to bring up the topic once again of air quality and HVAC in our schools. It's been a recurring theme over the past year, which is providing a safe environment for our students and staff so they can learn and work and thrive. This topic predates COVID with respect to our aging facilities in an increasingly changing climate. Now with COVID, HVAC concerns in our facilities have moved to the front of the line. The science is clear on the importance of ventilation as a primary risk mitigation strategy. The public funded an ambitious $409 million facility bond and asked that you accelerate the components of this plan having to do with air quality and monitoring. In the January 21st plan on HVAC that was presented to you, the board, it was suggested that the schools across the district be organized into 4 groupings for doing these upgrades. First would be all schools that would have filter replacements and upgrades. The remaining 3 groups would be selected 1 group at a time, starting times to be staggered 3 months apart. It's not at all clear how that first group was selected or what equity considerations were taken into account, although the board's direction was sought on the 21st. In last night's town hall, it was reported that this first group all had the same building style, though according to the ADIS plans presented on January 21st, the selected schools come from 2 different building styles. I've not yet seen any contracts or plans come through for those remaining 2 groups. Here's a major concern. You, the board, received updates on both February 4th and May 6th that stated that carbon dioxide detectors were slated to be installed in the first quarter of 2021. We learned yesterday in the town hall that this has not happened and that these detectors are not planned to be installed until the upgrades are complete. As far as I can tell, 2 of the 3 groups of schools aren't even scheduled yet. So why are these carbon dioxide detectors important? Carbon dioxide is an indicator of fresh air exchange in a room. These detectors allow for direct measurement, which then provides actionable data. We need monitoring. We need monitoring of air in classrooms now, not a year from now or 2 years from now. What do these plans and updates mean anyway if they aren't going to be implemented? Are you, the board, willing to ask these tough questions and to follow up? And the one last thing that I wanted to comment on is that these guidelines, so an AQI of 299 is not meaningfully different from an AQI of 300 or 301. These are just cutoffs that they make. When is that going to be actionable is really subjective. There is a better matrix, in my opinion, that's available through SFUSD that I suggest that you take a look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Eric, go ahead.
Hello, board. My name is Eric Park, and I spoke earlier, but I'm a parent of a 4th grader at Parkside Montessori. I want to start by thanking Superintendent Ochoa for being so well versed on the issues at hand as it regards to air quality in schools. It's so important to get this right now, and so I'm very personally appreciative of your efforts. I wanted to provide some comments regarding the 3 points that came up during the town hall yesterday. The first one is that the Superintendent Ochoa mentioned that nose swab for pool testing will be performed indoors. Asking children to take masks off en masse indoors doesn't seem safe. And I was wondering if the district might consider doing these outside instead. Second, Mr. Gaffney mentioned yesterday that the district is considering installing bipolar ionizers in schools. There's little evidence that these ionizers are actually helpful in combating COVID and can actually cause harm by creating too much ozone. Ionizer manufacturers are heavily marketing towards school districts right now, so I would urge the district to really dig into the research literature before making a decision. And if those funds are being made available, a better use of them might be to actually more frequently replace the HEPA and MERV 11 or 13 filters to make sure that they're done in an appropriate interval. I believe it's 3 or 4 times per year. And finally, a third point is regarding the CO2 sensors that Randy actually mentioned. Yeah, I think waiting 2 years to get those into some of these schools is going to be 2 seasons of wildfires where we're not going to have the data we need. So I would suggest possibly purchasing standalone or handheld CO2 meters for these schools until the HVAC upgrades are complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Next, we have Sandy. Sandy, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for this topic. I just wanted to comment. I feel like we're talking about, a school closure and working on some of the computer programs at home. And I think that's fine as long as it's for a day or 2. I just want to raise the point that if something crazy happens with these fires and we're looking at toxic levels for a week or more, I hope that we can have a plan in place where not distance learning, but emergency change of venue could look more similar to last year where there was actual instruction happening. I feel like I have PTSD from kind of what we went through, and I wouldn't want it to be like spring 2020 again, where it was really up to the teacher. And so some students and schools were getting daily interaction with their teacher over Zoom, and some were getting none. And just a plan for when and if it happens for a longer amount of time would make, I think, some people feel better. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Okay, President Chin, there are no other hands for public comment at this time.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for providing your public comments. This is a really, really interesting topic and important one for us. And I'm very curious to see what other board members think about this. Does anyone want to start the conversation? I'll start. So, you know, pre-COVID, right? I mean, wildfires and everything, this is just an annual situation that we're going to be in. And we knew about this. That's why Measure T, when we went out and advocated not just for the air conditioning, but there was filtration along before wildfires and then also COVID. In the end, we're spending, I think it was originally budgeted $100 million to upgrade all the HVACs in the district. I think as of last night, it was 92 million or so. So I think it's come down a little bit, but it is a huge concern. There is a concern that we are sort of between a rock and a hard place, or catch-22 in some ways, because we do have, you know, when the air is really bad outside and it gets over a certain threshold, you know, the recommendations are to close up the windows and doors and basically, you know, shelter in place in some ways. But because we're in a pandemic, that is almost counter to what we really need to do because of COVID. I do understand the issue of what the county is recommending, which is at 300 or more, they are recommending sort of the closure of schools because that's hazardous, but that's at the county level. And understanding that the county sets a certain threshold and that there are, what, 20, 25 plus individual school districts within the county, ranging from school districts that have just one school to us that has the largest, which is 21 schools. It's difficult for me when the county, even though we have been trying to maintain a consistency level with the county, it's difficult for me when they might say, let's set that threshold at 300 AQI, but it doesn't take into effect any of our existing sort of microclimates or the schools that we're in, or what kind of even HVAC systems that various school districts have. It was created before the pandemic, but the county is sticking to that 300 AQI threshold. So I am open to talking about a different metric, a lower metric that would cause, you know, our schools to essentially close only for a day or two, because we know that the air usually at the moment maybe only lasts bad air a couple days, hopefully. So I'm open to that discussion. I will say that I am sensitive to the questions that you guys brought up about the air now and Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and their only detector being in Redwood City. I will say that I did do a lot of research on this back before COVID, and even when we had the fires in 2018, but we had bad fires here, and I think it was like 3 or 4 days where it was really bad. And that was when there was a mass exodus in the Bay Area for those who could leave. We actually did leave and go farther south to kind of get some fresh air. At that time, I did some research myself, and I did actually purchase a purple air sensor. And so this is like my computer screen that I look at every single day, because I did install back in 2018 a sensor on the back of my house, just to know what that threshold is. And this sensor does update every 10 minutes, but it is a sort of user consumer friendly sort of sensor. It is really just not a scientific one. It is just like a baseline. Hey, this is what's really out there. So I understand the district's sort of reliance on something that was built and is more scientific in terms of the actual air quality sensor, albeit even though it's in Redwood City. I don't necessarily like it, but I think it kind of gives us a little bit of sort of a baseline in some ways to fall back on. But that only does update only once an hour, and it is only an average. I will say a couple days ago or last week, I was walking up the hill to pick up my daughter, and I looked outside and the air was really kind of smoky, and I didn't think anything of it. I looked at my phone and looked at sort of air now, and it says that air is, what was it, 62 or so. I called up my wife, asked her to check our own data, and it was at 150. But that was at the moment in time, you know, it was an hour delayed. So I'm sensitive to the fact of what kind of measurement and tool we use when we sort of set this threshold. I do think that there are a lot of sensors. It is sort of crowdsourced, but they aren't, purple air is not sort of a scientific sort of way. I mean, it was done by science and created by scientists, but it's not what the meteorologists use and everyone else when they actually determine what the actual air quality is. So I'm open to that discussion, but I'm also open to the idea that setting a lower threshold than 300, because we are fighting a pandemic, and the idea is that we don't want, if the air does get out of hand, essentially to close everything up and then put our students and our staff and employees at risk of further spreading COVID. So, and the fact that if you look at it, we're a much better place than 2 years ago, where we do have 1-to-1 ratio. We do have the curriculum. We do have hotspots. We could probably weather the bad air for a day or two. But I think, in my opinion, we'd probably have to also go back to our labor unions and discuss what is that going to look like? You know, what kind of connection do we have? What kind of connection do the teachers have with the students? And then lastly, my last comment, sorry, I'm rambling on here, but a lot of comments on this as I've been thinking about this last couple of weeks, is that if we were to go ahead and set a lower threshold, you know, we need to have some sort of communication with the parents. Like, to me, it can't just be at 8 a.m. of that day and say, hey, we're going to close school. You know, the idea is that usually Bay Area Air Quality Management District and the news, they always set out sort of like, hey, we're expecting some bad air, you know, next couple of days. We might need to actually send out a notice or something that said, these are our thresholds. This is what it is. And give parents a heads up, because there will be a lot of childcare issues, a lot of juggling if we have to do actually close the school or close the schools. So I'm very open to this conversation and the discussion about these metrics, and I'm very curious to see and hear what the rest of the board has to say.
I think all of you have raised really good points, and the questions you've asked have, you know, provided more insight. Sorry. When I think about this, you know, this agenda topic before us, I think of it as essentially like a contingency plan, right? Like if this were to happen again, and I think you know, I've seen a lot of people sharing like on social media these memories from like last year when we were like in the middle of the pandemic, and like it looked like, I mean, it was very traumatizing, right? And it was very unsafe. And we do need to plan for if this happens again. And to me, I think we're in a better place in terms of having more folks in our community vaccinated, but you know, we're a school district, so we have a lot of kiddos that are not vaccinated. And I do think it's important to take into account, you know, where are we getting our numbers from in terms of the air quality. But I also think that, you know, last year we had to make some decisions based on, you know, being like preferring to be safe than sorry. And I think of that right now, and I really feel like, you know, I personally, you know, I don't want to put any of our kids at risk, and I would feel comfortable with the number lower than the county. But I also, yeah, that's just generally how I feel about it. I think that I think it's a very scary thing for little ones, right? Like to like go outside and like and know that we're in a pandemic, and also know that we're again facing wildfires and yeah, I think it's just safer for our kiddos to stay home, and with the technology that we have now, you know, there can still be learning happening. And I think like it's just, I'd rather be safe than sorry. I am interested to kind of hear more about like Ken's last points about, you know, how and when will we be notifying parents. I think that's something that we can dig into, decide, and then communicate proactively before, hopefully, right? Before, like, because we don't know, like it could happen tomorrow, but hopefully not. And this, I think, would set kind of like a precedent for the future, because we know like these wildfires are not going away. I mean, I would love for them to go away, but I mean, that just doesn't seem realistic at this point. So yeah, happy to hear what others have to say.
I can jump in. I agree with Trustee Chin and Corzo. I'm would be interested in us considering a lower number. I guess a couple follow-ups, things that I'm just thinking about with the various levels. So I know kids are considered a part of sensitive groups just by default. I don't know up until what age, but for example, at my daughter's preschool, like the cutoff is 151 because they're little kids and they're part of a sensitive group, right? So I'm not advocating for 151 necessarily, right? I think it sounds like maybe we're considering the 200 and one, or the, pull up the level where it's very unhealthy. I was looking for the right terminology, versus the 300 where, you know, it's hazardous. And I think, you know, to Trustee Chin's point, right, those cutoffs around when we could keep, like for all of the reasons what we know kids should be in school, if we can bring kids to school and kids can be safe and the adults in the room can be safe, they should be in school. Obviously the curveball now is that when all the windows have to be closed and everyone has to be inside all the time, can we keep kids and adults safe? I don't know that we can in the way that we would want to at some of those higher air quality levels. And I think you know, we need to prioritize that. And so I'm definitely in favor of doing that. I think I have follow-up questions around what system we're using to track it. And I would like to know a little bit more about, I guess to Trustee Proctor's point, like what are experts using and saying should be used, because I'm still not convinced that this one is the right one. And I know that this is anecdotal, but this last weekend, the air quality was bad. And this is sitting here, like when I look at this, it's telling me it wasn't bad, right? So to me makes it seem like, is this, despite how long it takes and all of that, you know, actively feeling the impacts of bad air quality, and then this says the air quality was not bad during that time. To me, that raises like some concerns around using this exclusively. I understand the concerns around purple air. I'd be curious to know. I don't know if we can get information. I don't know. I'm trying to think about where. I mean, for, you know, my daughter goes to preschool that's affiliated with Stanford, so the decision making around COVID, around air quality, is all in collaboration with Stanford doctors and researchers or whatever. I'm happy to ask, you know, what they use, and there might be other kind of data points like that to consider, kind of what are the experts saying should be used. I don't think it's this one, because it usually correlated with purple air, like numbers, when they closed school last year. So just something to consider. I think that that's going to be a really important piece of things in terms of our decision making around when we're closing school. And then I just have questions around the structures and systems in place. So what kinds of supports can be put in place for students when we do close? So some of the concerns that Superintendent Ochoa raised around food and health, like in general, if they're going and, you know, kind of contingencies around when we have to make, if we're able to make a school closure the day before, there are contingencies that can be put in place around meal delivery or meal accessibility. Here's, you know, somebody on site if you have an urgent matter, you know, like, are there some of those sorts of contingencies so that students that are not safe to be home, that don't have meals at home, like we have those in place in advance, and parents and families know about that. I also wonder about kind of learning at home and what that looks like. And so I just have questions around the structures and systems with that too. And I know, you know, we'll work with unions around some of that, but you know, for example, do students always have their Chromebooks at home? So if they find out once they've left school and they're not coming to school the next day, do they always have them at home with them? If not, we wouldn't be able to expect online learning to take place, right? So does that mean they're always taking them back and forth? What happens if they don't? Like, all of those sorts of things that I just feel like I guess I'm left with like some questions around, and particularly when we think about it through like an equity lens, like students that wouldn't have that access otherwise, and students that even if they left their Chromebook at home, they have, you know, or they're home for the day and their parents are working from home and they have food and they, you know, have devices, and those students that don't have that same access, and how we're ensuring that the decision that we're making around school closure isn't detrimental to certain groups of students, or isn't providing additional barriers. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking through as we make these decisions, but I'm definitely in favor of a lower number than the current county cutoff, because I think it is incumbent upon us to consider COVID when we're making the decision, and it can't be just an isolation of general air quality.
So in terms of the number that we're looking at, I also agree that we might want to, you know, look at a lower number. I was just kind of reading the descriptions, and so one of them, I think it's just in the unhealthy category. It's not even in very unhealthy, but it talks about a child who complains of difficulty breathing, and to me, that's a big concern to me, because I think, you know, if kids are having trouble breathing, then that's a big deal. So, you know, whether it's 201 or something different, I think that makes sense to me, but just even reading like these unhealthy ones makes me a little bit concerned. And I think my main concern is just really making sure that when we do have kids on campus, that our classrooms are safe. And so if there's somebody that's looking at our classrooms and determining whether the ventilation and filtration is acceptable at certain levels, I think that would be important to know. I think we just have to look at this from like a holistic view, that we're dealing with COVID, we're dealing with smoky air, we're dealing with HVAC systems that need to be upgraded, and you know, factor all that in. I would like to get back to at some point hearing more about the plan for the HVAC systems and really nailing down a timeline, something that we can stick to as best as possible, because you know, this isn't going anywhere, and I know it takes time, and it's not going to happen overnight, but I think just being really clear about what the plan is would be good.
Okay, so I was able to do a quick lit search and found an article from the magazine Nature dated 9/20/2020. And the title of this article is Health Effects of Wildfire Smoke in Children and Public Health Tools, a Narrative View. The abstract reads that wildfire smoke is increasing environmental health, and kids are particularly vulnerable. I don't think that's new to anybody here. I think we can all agree to that. There are very few studies intentionally focused on pediatric populations, because generally speaking, people don't like to test on kids all the time. Retrospectively, you'll find a lot of testing. But it does highlight the fact that kids are especially vulnerable due to increased exposures, because just kids being kids are outside more than most adults. They breathe more air related to body weight, and also they're still growing and developing. When the kids have had nasal swabs done, there's less particles in the nostrils, and they find that more particles have penetrated deep within the lungs. There's also adverse effects on developing lungs in childhood, and these health effects can show up and be apparent across their lifespan. Exposure to particulate matter may also have neuropsychological effects on kids, including school performance and memory. There's also metabolic and growth effects due to exposure. The American Academy of Pediatrics also issues wildfire guidelines, which includes installing MERV 13 filters, HEPA filters, and also warns against never using an air filter that generates ozone. So these are coming from pretty reliable sources. And now we're adding, that's just the wildfire smoke. And now we're going to add COVID on top of this, which it's like, oh my gosh, so much more. I fully support having a lower number be our threshold for keeping kids at home. Most of our kids are still, actually all of our kids, we're like preschool all the way through 12, 13, maybe a few 14-year-olds. They're all really developing still, and they deserve just as much of an opportunity to have healthy lungs and have a healthy lifespan. And missing a day or two of school shouldn't stand in the way necessarily of that happening for them. As with other trustees, I am concerned about obviously nutrition, because if they're not getting their nutrition, then that's also an issue. Missing counseling services or other health-related services, that is an issue as well. Also, when we look at other vulnerable populations, such as our special education and some of our other groups that we have identified as our equity groups, school is an important place to go to. So that also needs to be looked at and balanced as well. I too am interested to see, and this may have been said in last night's town hall, and I might have missed this number, but how many of our schools currently have MERV 13 filters? I don't believe it's all of them. And if that's something that the American Academy of Pediatrics is recommending, it kind of seems like maybe that should be pushed up on a timeline, and that should be something that we consider as important as well. And I just would like to hear more discussion around where we are with the HVAC and how can we move this project along, especially now that we're in wildfire season and we've got all these different variants. Right now it's Delta, next week it could be Mu. COVID's not going away anytime soon. So we might as well, just get these filters in place.
That's great. And I think timely wise, I think we're up for a facilities update. I think it's supposed to be the next meeting. So in 2 weeks.
Upcoming meeting.
Yeah. So I think we're raising these issues, and I know that we have it coming up on our schedule. So it sounds like, if I can summarize, that everyone seems to be in favor of a lower threshold. This is not up for a vote, but it sounds like we also have a ton of questions, and I think it merits obviously not a reschedule, but a return to this topic at another meeting. Does that sound right, Superintendent Ochoa?
It does, and if I can comment for a couple of minutes on Randy Painter mentioned during her public comments on this topic that the San Francisco Unified School District has a tool on their website that what they did is they basically took the chart that I broke into 3 different pages showing the unhealthy for sensitive groups, the unhealthy, and then the very unhealthy, and then the hazardous. And they basically put it on one chart. And what they entered in there that isn't in the charts I showed the school board is that when the rating for the air quality index reaches very unhealthy, one of the bullet points in there in terms of mitigation steps is the superintendent's office would determine to close schools based on a variety of factors that would constitute a need for a school closure. And that's listed in both the very unhealthy and the hazardous section. Our geography, you and I talked about this the other day, President Chin. If you are standing at Highlands Elementary School and you are standing and somebody else is standing at Bowditch Middle School on the same day at the same time, you are literally in a different geographical, topographical place. One is like feet away from the water and the other is up in the hills. You know, I haven't looked on my school on my iPhone recently, but it's multiple miles away. It's like 4 or 5 miles away from each other. And so, you know, what I think is important for all of us to also talk about is that we are making these decisions for all of our students and staff, not just where you live. You might happen to live in a place where the air quality appears to be less severe than in another place. But at the same time, we have 11,000 kids at 21 different schools, and we need to be safeguarding all of their health. One thing I could bring back to the school board meeting is a chart that looks a version of the San Francisco Unified District chart. With the board's direction, I can engage immediately with our county office and local air quality officials. That's actually the recommendation that's given by the California Department of Education, by the California Association of County Superintendents, by the Association of California School Administrators, and all these organizations that have combined to think about air quality. I think in a non-COVID year, this is the kind of conversation we would have had in May or April, but you know, we're still sort of in the throes of the Delta variant and the pandemic. And so my perspective on this is that we're bringing this up for conversation now, because the other consideration we need to discuss at our next meeting is parents will decide for themselves whether or not to send their children to school if they believe the air quality conditions are unsafe for their children. So we could say that we're open, but many parents will just choose to keep their kids home because they'll look outside and say, I'm not sending my child outside when the air quality looks this way. I'm going to keep my child home today, or I'm not going to work, or my employer is not making me go to work because the air quality is 215 or 225. And to also remember, we employ people who work outdoors. Not all of our employees work indoors. Many employees work outdoors. So, you know, there's a risk to our employees themselves and what their, you know, serious health complications could be resulting from prolonged exposure to working outdoors.
So do you think, Superintendent Toa, that you'll probably come back at the next meeting, or do you think
September 23rd is my recommendation.
Okay, so that we will continue this conversation in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Is everybody okay with that?
I
Great.
just wanted to add something real quick. I'm a little concerned on, like, I know there's like a lot of unanswered questions, but what's to say that like next week there's not going to be like, you know, really bad air quality and we don't, and we've kind of put it off, right? And just to what Superintendent Ochoa just shared, I think about, you know, last year when the air quality was at the worst that I've ever seen it, right? And I know people just to be super blunt, like from the next community, my community, that like were working, right? Gardeners, painters, farm workers, like there was no staying home, right? And that was also, I think, a reflection of like, you know, their employers' unwillingness to keep them home for their own safety, right? So I think there's, you know, there are people in our community who, you know, are going to say, well, you know, if I'm going to work, they're going to school. And that's just because that's what they're kind of being forced to do. But we have a responsibility to our little kids, our little ones, especially to make really hard decisions. And I'm worried now, to be honest. Like, I think, you know, last year during the pandemic as well, like I was in the same, I was like feeling the same way of like, I'd rather be overly cautious because there's like people's health and futures and at stake. And I'm kind of like getting that I'm feeling worried again because I know so many people that, you know, were out there being exposed to that. And we know like health impacts are greater on certain communities. And yeah, I mean, just, you know, just recently, like, you know, I went to like San Mateo Medical Center for something. And, you know, just I don't know, I'm sorry, just like health disparities and health impacts, I think are something that affect people very differently. And I'm feeling that sense of urgency right now to not push it back 2 weeks, because what if 2 weeks is too late?
So Etta, just putting you on the spot, do you have a further direction or discussion that you'd like us to take? Because I do understand, and I mean, right, we were all worried today about the lightning that could happen, right? And all of a sudden the winds could change, and the Dixie or Caldor or even but I think the bridge fire could affect us. But do you have something you'd like us to consider?
Like a number? Or yeah, okay.
Yeah, throw it out there. Let's just, I mean, we're all in favor of actually a lower number. So
yeah,
might as well just take the opportunity. Let's just do it.
So
I mean, I don't think we can vote on it.
We can provide
consider it, but
direction,
we can just say, this is what we're thinking.
Let me pull up these numbers again. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to like keep everything up on my computer. I think red, somewhere in red, 150 to 151 to 200. I think, I mean, honestly, like even orange 101 to 150 is unhealthy for kids, but I think red is like very clearly unhealthy. I don't feel like I have the right kind of information to say, you know, where are we going to get those numbers from? And I know we've all had a lot of questions about that, but I think that's something that our staff can work on and dig into. And so I'm just proposing that somewhere in the 151 to 200 range.
So just gonna wait for anyone else in case anybody else wanted to chime in before I do, but okay. So I have seen, and granted this is purple air, that, you know, there are times that over the last couple of weeks that we've exceeded 150, albeit it was short. It was like an hour or so, you know, and this is just the numbers that I look at near my house. So it could be something totally different up at Highlands or down by the bay in Bowditch. I kind of feel like that number might be a little low. I would be more in favor of like the 201. I know that in soccer and AYSO and everybody else, they have determined that 151, there's no games, there's no practices, but that's because the kids are out there exerting, you know, effort and exercising, albeit with masks on and everything else. To sort of put that threshold at the same one for schools, I'm a little reluctant on that one. I personally would be in favor more of like a 201 where it actually is in the purple, sort of says unhealthy, but I completely understand where you're coming from, so.
Yeah, and I'll just also say that I think the other pieces that we talked about, right? Like, how are we going to make sure kids have access to food? I'm thinking now to like, you know, like, because there's also disparities in who has like air purifiers in their homes and access to, you know, filtration and all of these things. I'm kind of like thinking like, you know, there are air centers, I think sometimes like clean air centers that the county pops up. And so I'm just wondering if we can like make a really thoughtful plan around, and you know, I'm fine with if the board agrees that like 201 is a number, now I'm just thinking more about like the other pieces. You know, how are we going to make sure kids have food, and you know, can kids have access to, let's say, like mental health support, or if they had already existing appointments at school with like a therapist, or you know, can those things still happen online? So yeah, I'm fine with that.
I agree with that same category, whatever. I think it was 201. That's kind of like at a minimum to me. That seems like a good category. I was just pulled up the I know it's San Francisco, but I was looking at what they recommend in those categories, and if we can come up with something similar where it would say what specifically happens in the categories, that would be helpful. Because I think in their district they say at the 150, at the unhealthy range is when you close windows and doors. And so I'll just go back to my point about whether our classrooms are safe when windows and doors are closed, and if that's the time when we would close them and it's not safe, then I would be concerned.
Okay, at the interest of looking at our time and our number of things on the agenda, it sounds like I got 4 nodding heads around 201 or so. I do agree that there is sort of the unknown that, you know, do we wait for another 2 weeks, right? There's sort of like, we can plan and keep planning and keep planning, and then all of a sudden something happens. It's, you know, we might not have timed it right. So I do think that there are a lot of unanswered questions about food, about sort of the air filtrations, about everything. And I think, and I'm going to put you on the spot there, Superintendent Ochoa, that I'm hoping that you have enough information to go by, knowing that we're going to come back. But if something were to happen between now and the next meeting, it'd be great if you could maybe just relieve some anxiety that we might have, that something that you might have some preliminary plan that, albeit is just off the top of your head, but something.
I would just like to add a couple of comments too. Yeah, 201 I think is a good number. Things that I do have a concern about, going back to Trustee Corzo's comment about some families, parents go to work, there's, you know, the kids are going to go to school. I mean, that's, you know, that can be used as, it's an alternative for childcare. So how would we make sure that we're looking at what those families might need? You know, I'm also looking at kids with IEPs. I know that there's a law in place that students with IEPs, the moment school closes, they have to have an emergency IEP in place. And I don't know how many of our students have an emergency IEP. I know that kind of came into effect last year with the pandemic, because, you know, they get services at the schools. So, you know, some of these kids, that's the only place where they can get the services. So I would be interested to know, and just to make sure that we have all those pieces lined up as well, for any potential school closure.
Last comments, Superintendent Ochoa?
When we return in 2 weeks, we will have the sources of air quality index more fully fleshed out. We'll have and seek something in writing from our local air quality officials in San Mateo County. We will have a draft for the board to review of a mitigation and sort of actions or steps taken as those criteria develop. And we'll have for the board a list of considerations on the academic side, as well as on the health and wellness or nutrition side, and an analysis on the steps to take vis-a-vis student designated services, those being 504, IEP, and health and wellness services.
Sounds like a lot of stuff. So I look forward to our next meeting. I think as all of us do, as it's a very relevant issue. Okay, so let's move on to our strategic plan, which is item 6.3.
Thank you, President Chin. Today was our first strategic plan get together. It was held in this room. We had a group of about 37 in person today. It looked very different, but the completion of the work that you see on the walls in front of you, I think it makes me feel happy to just look at the work that these folks did. I want to call out our facilitator and presenter, Sapide Yo. She's a trainer with a Master's in Governance program through the California School Boards Association. Sapide organized the activities for today and started with an hour-long culture and community building activity where she asked everyone in the group to tell who they were and what they were there to get involved with. In other words, our why, and then asked us to talk about what dreams we had. And I kind of wanted, Sue was there and Patrick, I kind of wanted it to end right there. Like, I felt so good after hearing 37 people's dreams of what they wanted for children and what they wanted for education. It was very uplifting. And then what we did is we actually took the painting that's on the wall, the district's vision and the mission statement, and had every person in the team be assigned to a different group randomized. So I ended up in a group with the president of the Ed Foundation, with a school principal, and with a school teacher. And then every group was different. So a mixture of certificated, classified, and administrative. And basically what we were told was start by identifying some core values. And what you see around the room is core values like social emotional learning, core values like inclusion, a love or a passion for learning, connectedness, belonging, equitable access, growth mindset. And from there, some groups got further along than others. There were groups that actually went through and said, we really think our vision should read this way. And other groups that got further even beyond that and said, our mission should read this way. So it was a great way for everyone in the room to think about how, as a district, we identify what makes us who we are, and then what we see for children in the future, because that's really what your vision is where you want children to end up. Where do you want them when you send them off? Where are you sending them, and what are you sending them with? So it was all in all a very, very uplifting event. We had I think it was 19, something like that, 19 of the 21 schools represented, and we did have a few members that weren't able to be there for a variety of reasons. So we had very, very good representation, and it's actually springing us forward to our next meeting, which is on September 30th, where we will be doing a very deep data dive, going through our reading, our math, our English, our ELD, our just a real thorough collection of student achievement data, and actually qualitative data as well, survey data. It will be a good 3.5 hours in that same setting with the same group of people in taking us through a real rigorous process to evaluate and contemplate the data that we need to reflect on. And then the last hour of our next meeting on the 30th will basically be a revisiting of our vision and our mission and our values, because part of this process is that this committee will make some recommendations to the school board for you all to discuss publicly, and the ideas of maybe adding some language to our mission, vision, and values. I do want to give a programming note to you all because you weren't there today, but in the superintendent's office, we actually have documents that date back like 70 years. We have a little storage facility here where we have old school board meeting binders and books. They used to sort of bind the physical documents, and we have those saved. So we were able to actually show members of our strategic planning committee that this vision and mission has not been our vision and mission forever and ever. It actually changes, and it's okay to think about how to adapt your vision and your mission so that it reflects what's going on now. There's actually one here right next to me that there's a picture. It dates back to 2007, where it looks like two children sort of jumping, reaching for a star, and the words were achieving, contributing, and succeeding. And I think that's kind of how it translated a little bit into live, lead, and learn. I think that's sort of the connection between those two visuals and those two mission and vision statements. And so the takeaway for the school board is that this idea of putting together a strategic plan was premised on an expectation that we would be able to bring together our classified school employees union, our teacher, our certificated staff bargaining group, our administrators, and get parents and community to the table. We had representation from the city of San Mateo. We had our Ed Foundation represented. We had our CDAC committee represent. So we had a very thorough representation there, and I think we succeeded. I think we had a really great event. You heard about it tonight from a couple of the members that spoke. I'm going to ask Sue and Patrick to chime in here and just give your perspective. You both were in that setting today, and Alma Ellis was there as well. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Sue, and to you, Patrick, just to give your impressions and give the board a little bit of feedback. And then from there, we'll pass it over to the board for questions.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and start. It was a really good, productive day. I think it was worthwhile to spend time just building that sort of community at the beginning. At the same time, I feel like we got a good start on the vision and mission. And so I'm really looking forward. I was really impressed with everyone's engagement, and we had good representation from the various groups. And, I just informally spoke to a lot of people, and they were really feeling good about the day, and it felt productive, and we're looking forward to the next session.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. I would echo that as well.
How's that? Oh, now I'm live. Good. I said I was pulling a Diego there, so I was going to tell you I mute myself. No, what I was saying is that today's session, there was a lot of genuine excitement. There was laughter, there was cheering, and the other thing I would just share with you too, that there were several common interests, genuinely common interests, and I think there's a lot of momentum behind this too, belief in the process. And I think the end result is going to be something that we're all really proud of and can focus in on together. And I thought there was tremendous representation. I think we heard from one of our principals earlier tonight too about the number of schools that were represented. So a great mix of folks that that participated, and thank you to Superintendent Ochoa, and thank you to Tatiana as well too. I know Tatiana was influential in making this happen. So thank you to both of you, and just really proud to be part of the process. So thank you.
Fantastic. Clarifying questions from the board. This is an informational item, right? Just as an update. I don't think you're asking for any future direction. It's just information. So any clarifying questions from the board?
Just one on the data that you guys are going to go through next meeting. Will that be available somewhere for people that are just curious to see what was discussed and what kind of information was shared?
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Trustee Proctor. Our plan is to send out a communication district-wide notifying the public about the meeting that took place today, and the same process for the upcoming meeting. We've got a little bit of lead time between now and the 30th. And my plan was to discuss it at our September 23rd school board meeting and my superintendent's report. And that same night to send out the communication with the access to the data that we're going to be sharing on the 30th.
Great, thank you. Any other board member clarifying questions? No, okay. Public member in the audience? No, all right, thank you. We're gonna move on to members online. Peter, would you mind opening a public comment on this item, please?
Absolutely. Any member of the public that would like to make comment on this item, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom. Okay, we have Marcella. Marcella, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to comment on the process of the strategic plan. I appreciate that it's going to roll out over several months. Having been on multiple strategic planning processes, the thoughtfulness with which this was designed, I think, is something to be proud of as a district. I know there isn't a space for public clarifying questions, but I did have one, which is, I noticed that the report that's in the agenda is different than the printout report in that it involves or indicates for students. I do feel that student involvement in anything that the district does is key, especially because we do have really thoughtful, brilliant students in the district. But I'm wondering at what point they'll be brought in, because I don't think they were there today. And at what point there will be additional opportunities for people who are not on the strategic planning committee or group to weigh in or give their input as decisions as this process is being moved forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Marcella. Okay, President Chin, we have no other hands for public comment.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to officially close public comment on this item. Open up for board comments, because again, this is just an informational item. Anyone?
I'll just say that I'm super happy that our district is engaging in this process. You know, the last time that we talked about mission and vision as a board was several years ago. And I don't feel like we had a multi-year strategic plan. And so that is something that we definitely have needed, and that I think is really going to be key to setting our district up for success and focusing on, you know, those priorities that we know are very needed in our district and our community.
I agree. You guys can hear me? Okay, sorry, my headphones, so it's a little complicated. Yeah, I agree. I'm really excited to hear the updates from this. I think this is really, you know, I think when we think about kind of having this idea of like beginning with the end in mind, backwards planning, and like we need to know where we're going and what our goals are, and then being able to intentionally kind of backwards map how we get there. I just think it's a really important process. You know, it sounds like there's a good team that's gathered together to work on this. To Marcella's point, I was wondering if will we have students involved? And if so, what's the plan for that? And then also, I think gathering additional feedback from the other members of the community at some point. I know that there will be opportunity during public comment, you know, at board meetings when there's updates provided, but I don't know if there's other ways that you're thinking about getting kind of larger input around it outside of the group, but I think it'd be helpful to know if that's the case, and if not, for us to think about ways to potentially do that. But I'm really looking forward to updates around this. Super exciting. Thank you.
Ditto everything that was said. The one other additional thought that came to mind when I was looking at this was that the way that we select people to be on these kind of committees, it's always kind of follows the same pattern, and there's not always an opportunity for people who aren't on a committee or a task force to participate. And so I'm also curious how a member of the public who's not part of this committee might get to participate, and then just looking forward at other opportunities where we might be able to pull people in. Maybe it's not this, not specifically this strategic plan committee because that's already formed, but going forward when we need committees, maybe keeping some space for people that aren't already involved.
Yeah, I have really not a whole lot to add that hasn't already been said. I just think it's great that we are engaging people in this discussion, and it's not necessarily like the same group of people. Having like casting a broader net would be nice in the future. And just making sure that we aren't just hearing the same voices in the future. But I'm loving what I'm seeing and hearing the reports back from Sue and Patrick about how the day went. You know, it's really encouraging and really exciting to hear.
Great, I agree with the rest of the trustees. I know you want to comment, but I'll say something, just my short piece, and then I'll let you talk. It definitely does sound like it would be great to go out to the community, either some sort of community workshop or something. I'm thinking like our LCAP engagement or something where we actually go out and say like, this is just a topic, just collect some additional comments on the process as we get further along. I'm very happy that we're going through with the process that it has started. I think for those who remember or don't remember, I think our last strategic plan basically expired right before we came on the board. I think it was 2017 or 2018 or something. So in some ways we've been playing, I wouldn't say catch up because we had COVID and everything else, but this is just another sign of us doing some long-term planning to show where we want to go as a district for the next 5 years. And so I think it's a really great thing for us to do. So I will leave it at that. And Superintendent Cho, I think you wanted to provide some comments or feedback before we move on.
Thank you for that, President Chin. First, we reached out to the parents of students at both Bowditch and Burrell. We're working with our principals at Abbott and at Bayside to identify students. This is again sort of speaking to the issue that Allison brought up and Shara brought up. You know, I think when you have students who represent other students at their school, namely like a student body president or a class president, it sort of follows that it makes sense to invite them to participate. That's similar to like having the elected or leadership members of groups like CDAC and groups like the Ed Foundation attend because they represent the 30 or 40 or 50 members that participate with their group. there are two ways that will involve students. The first is that we have dates coming up in our strategic plan process that relate specifically to the identification of strengths as a district and weaknesses as a district. And we plan to involve students at that point in time. We believe by then we'll have the necessary approvals from the parents, because these children will need to miss school. These meetings take place during the school day. So there's a bit of coordinating to get kids into these meetings, as opposed to employees who we either hire a substitute or they, delay the duties that they were working on until, like Sue and Patrick, you guys are doing today's work tomorrow. Congratulations. And tomorrow's work on Saturday. And then our students would basically kind of have to do that. They have to get their work early or do it the next day. So there's a bit of coordination that happens there, but we will have students very involved in this process. The second way, and I think it speaks to the culture that I hope starts to take root in our district, which is a culture where we invite people in to the process of how we make decisions. So that if you think about something like air quality, we discussed it tonight for 45 minutes at this meeting. There's 45 people watching. There's likely others that will hear about it from their friends or colleagues. And then last night we had a YouTube discussing air quality and COVID. We have 500 views as of just earlier this evening. And so we will be rolling out a 6-episode series for our one SMFC podcast that will focus on the strategic plan process, where we'll bring in members of the strategic plan committee to talk with me over the course of the next 6 months, giving updates as part of a mini series in our season 1 of the One SMFC podcast. And we are approaching the point in time where we're actually going to start a Spanish version, Un SMFC, that will be broadcast the same day as the One SMFC. So we'll start the process of sending out the email in English and Spanish with links to both, where folks can hear both at the same time. So there won't be like a 2-day delay or a 1-week delay. It'll just be a matter of recording it a second time. And so we have a technology now that allows us to take an English recording. Like if I sat down with Trustee Proctor, unless I'm mistaken, you don't speak Spanish? Okay. So if you and I sat down and did a podcast, then we now use a technology that allows us to transcribe our audio recording and translate it. And we have secured staff members who speak Spanish that would be willing to essentially re-record the podcast in a way that we're not translating what you're saying, we're actually speaking, we're sort of taking it through so people get the exact answers that you gave, instead of somebody trying to, in the moment, explain what you just said, which Noelia, you and I have been doing this all our lives for our families. It's hard to do. You miss a lot of things. And, it's just not an authentic way to get exactly what people said. At the same time, we will have a video version of our content through our YouTube live stream, which to date, when you add up the 3 events we've held, 3,500 views district-wide. So we think that the reach for being able to allow members of the public to participate is really great. When we hold these YouTube events, we actually leave the chat function open, and there are hundreds of messages at the end of each one. So this is not a static experience. People are in there, they're talking, they're chatting, they're asking questions, and we live answer the questions they're submitting. So our plan is to basically include that in the same process. And I have Spanish-speaking employees who have agreed to do the same thing that we're going to do with the Un SMFC podcast, which is to translate and do an immediate Spanish version of the English version YouTube live stream that would happen shortly thereafter the English one ends. So like next week, the plan is 5:30 Wednesday, September 15th in English, and then 6:30 in Spanish. So wish me luck. And we'll know how many people watched it. That's the great thing.
No, fantastic. Thank you for that update. Just one follow-up on the strategic plan. Then will we see a further update on this, or will you come back during your superintendent's report and provide updates?
On the 23rd, you'll get a verbal report. Always after a session, you'll have a more thorough report. It'll be agendized and on your calendar.
Great, fantastic. Okay, we've got just a couple more items left. And we are moving on to item 7.1, which is our unaudited actuals. And this is up for a vote.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Thanks for your time. As President Chin just said, we're presenting the unaudited actuals this evening and asking for your approval of that. We provided you with a couple different sets of information in your board packet tonight. You received an executive summary, it's about 14 pages, a 200-page SACS report with a lot of information there. And we're going to walk through these slides with you tonight too, which we'll go through, which captures some of the highlights of the unaudited actuals. And before I jump into these slide sets, just wanted to thank a few folks who were who helped put this information together, certainly in the business office, the team members. I want to recognize Cynthia Shea, our new Director of Fiscal Services, Blanca Cervantes, and Joanne Murphy, who's our new senior accountant. So thank you to all of them for assisting us with this information. So let's see if I can start that. Very good. Okay, so we're just talking about this first slide's about where we're at in the cycle. We've gone through the adopted budget tonight. You're at the unaudited actual. September, we're already beginning working on the first interim information. We'll have our auditors come in October to audit the information you'll approve tonight. And we'll bring the audit report to you January, leading to our second interim, estimated actuals in June, and then again, this recurring cycle for the adopted budget, okay? So this snapshot for you is a snapshot of the total revenues and expenditures for the year and what our beginning fund balance was and our ending fund balance is at the end of this year. This slide shows you a breakdown of your revenues from both an unrestricted and restricted total, and it captures for you those totals in both the unrestricted and restricted category and shows it you as percentages as well. This slide shows you our general fund expenditures, breaks those down in unrestricted and restricted, and again shows you these represented as a percentage, and on the far right hand side, the total expenditures of each of those different categories. This slide shows you the components of your ending fund balance. And we've gone through this last year and just walked through again some of the components in here too. When we look at our reserve requirements, that's captured for you in here too. So you got a 6% reserve, that's part of your board policy. So that's 3% above the economic uncertainty reserve requirement. And there's other components that are captured for you here in this ending fund balance. And we are at first interim, we'll show you some adjustments to these numbers as well too, along with some of the initiatives that are underway that are going to modify and utilize some of these balances as we're working on some strategic initiatives for the current year. So this shows you what your components of the ending fund balance is, and this on the unrestricted side for the total of $37 million. This slide captures for you too, and it's a little busy, but the right-hand side captures for you at a high level what the variances were between your estimated actuals, which were done in May, and your unaudited actuals, which were presented to you tonight. And we capture for you at a high level the delta between your revenues and expenditures, about a $3.9 million variance in your revenues and about a $3.8 million variance in your expenditures. So comes out close to about the same number. Some of the components on the revenue side, which we capture for you in the executive summary, we had an adjustment to our RDA funds, which we share with you with Superintendent Diego as well too. That's that first line item there, the LCFF source adjustment. The federal revenues, this is just timing recognition of that revenue associated with ESSER funds. And on the salary side, where there's a few dollars in here too, which are the variances in our books and supplies and services and other operating expenditures categories. We had a question from one of our parents earlier tonight in terms of where some of the contracts are captured for NPSs, and that would be in the services and operating expenditures category too. So again, this is a high level recap for you what the variances are. And what the bottom line variance is to your ending fund balance, about a $32,000 variance to our estimated actuals and our unaudited actuals. Okay, other funds we've captured for you here as well too. Again, what the variances are between your estimated actuals and your unaudited actuals. The the fund that had a variance that I went back and looked at here too, and from a process perspective in the building fund, what was carried forward into the estimated actuals was the same number in the bond fund at the second interim time frame, and actually what was carried forward was close to the actual expenditures as of second interim as of January. And so that's why we see a little bit of variance here. So this just represents the total variance in the building fund and the other funds on this spreadsheet for you as well too. Okay, so that's a quick highlight for you. And again, there's a narrative for you in your executive summary on this. This slide just speaks to we prepare this information. It's a fair presentation. And the next budget checkpoint will be the first interim, and the cutoff date for that is October 31st. We're actually working on that. I think Blanca's working incredible hours, so hopefully she left, but she's working on that. She's working on that today too, so we'll look forward to bringing that forward to you. Okay, and that's the next checkpoint for you in December of this year. So that's a quick recap for you of the unaudited actuals. So we're asking for your approval of that, and our auditors will be in the October break, school break. The auditors will be in to audit that information. So thanks for your time.
All right, thank you, Patrick, for that presentation. Clarifying questions from the board. Does anybody have any? I know we see these like all the time, but it is one of those things that comes up. Any questions? Okay. All right, we're going to go to open it for public comment. Thank you, Drew, for shaking your head. Is there any members of the public online? Please, Peter, if you wouldn't mind opening up public comment on that.
Yes, any member of the public that would like to make comment on this particular item, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom now. President Chin, we have no hands for public comment.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to officially close the public comment period on item 7.1, opening up for board discussion and or vote or motion, because this is an action item. Does anybody have anything they want to say, or does anybody want to just make a motion?
If nobody has comments, I'm happy to make a motion to approve the 2020-2021 unaudited actuals.
I'll second.
Great, thank you, Trustee Watkins for the motion and Trustee Proctor for the second. We'll do roll call vote. Trustee Corzo.
Yes.
Trustee Proctor.
Yes.
Trustee Watkins.
Yes.
Trustee Warren.
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. All right, we are moving on to what I previously had mentioned earlier in the day, 8.1.
Good evening. It's before the board is a request for approval of employment contract for Assistant Superintendent of Student Services. Dennis Hills is being recommended to be employed as the new Assistant Superintendent of Student Services beginning tomorrow and ending June 30th, 2024. Dennis has been the Director of Human Resources, a very effective and successful leader in the district. And we're very fortunate to have someone with his experience. Previously, Dennis was the Assistant Superintendent overseeing student services and educational services in Burlingame. And prior to that, he was a elementary school principal and started his site administration in Palo Alto and in London. In addition, Dennis has also been a counselor and a special education teacher. And so his experience really provides him, the skill set to be successful in this position. So I respectfully request that the board approve the contract for employment for the Assistant Superintendent of Student Services. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you for that presentation. Any clarifying questions? No, any members? Thank you, Drew, for shaking your head in the public. Peter, if you wouldn't mind opening up for online public comment, if any?
Absolutely. Any member of the public that would like to make comment on this item, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom. Okay, President Jin, we have no hands for public comment.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm officially closing public comment on item 8.1, opening up for board discussion comments, but it is also up for a vote. So does anybody want to make comments or anything?
Yeah,
Go
sure. It
ahead.
looks like you started tonight, if you ask me. Just kidding. Yeah, we're really excited to have you join our amazing team over there on the other side of the dais. Or, yeah, I think you're like a super, like just all of the experience that you have, and you've already, you already know our district, and we're just so excited that you are able to step into this role and help us, continue moving forward and serving our kiddos. So welcome.
Oh, I wanted to say a comment. Yeah. Dennis, I'm so excited for you. I am thrilled for you, and thank you for everything you've done for our district and will continue to do. Just looking forward to great things from you. So thank you and congrats.
Echoing what everyone else shared, Dennis, super excited. And I know you bring like a wealth of experience, and just have heard such positive feedback from so many individuals. And I know that a lot of people in the district are really excited for you to take on this new role. So thank you, and looking forward to working more closely.
Congratulations, Dennis. Well, I guess not officially yet, right? But anyway, we know it's a mere formality at this point. I can't wait to see what you're going to be bringing to the role of Assistant Superintendent of Student Services. And I'm looking forward to working with you more closely.
Before we make a motion, I'll also say that congratulations. I think it's a foregone conclusion that we're going to vote for this. I love the fact that, whenever we are able to promote someone from within the district who's been with us through the thick and thin of everything we've been through, especially the last year and a half, it's been fantastic. I think, you're a great asset to the district, and I can't wait for you to continue on. So I really appreciate all your hard work, and I'll start by saying congratulations right now. But does anyone want to make a motion?
I motion to approve this agenda item.
A second?
I'll second.
Oh, I think Trustee Parker might have said it first. Thank you, Trustee Corzo, for the motion, and Trustee Parker for the second. Roll call vote. Trustee Corzo.
Yes.
Trustee Parker.
Yes.
Trustee Watkins.
Yes.
Trustee Warren.
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. Congratulations, Dennis. Not to move us along, but we only have a couple items left, formality wise. Otherwise, we'd probably say, come and shake your hand. But board member statements. Any board member statements or requests for future agenda items?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I wanted us to follow up on our SRO resolution. I pulled some things. Actually, this is very telling, as Dennis just stepped in. A lot of this actually probably falls on your plate. Welcome. I pulled a few things from the actual resolution, but I think it makes sense to return to the resolution in its entirety. But one of the things was to modify one of our board policies that permits law enforcement to question students before informing a parent or guardian. And so I would love for us in the very near term to bring that policy forward now that we have students back in school, and also to bring forward any other board policies related to school discipline and procedures for the board to review and examine. So that was one piece of it. I would also love for us to, so we had some listening sessions and recommended, we had some listening sessions with the community and folks in the schools, but I don't think we've had like a comprehensive analysis of what that entailed. And then as a result of that, what do we do? Something else I pulled out of that resolution was around engaging in bi-monthly public school discipline report that includes a variety of data that it's in the resolution, so I won't read all of it, but out of school suspensions, number of times police are called, those sorts of things, and for that to be brought back to the board. So I think it probably makes sense to bring back the whole resolution, but just wanted to call out some of those things as things that I would love for us to visit soon.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of volunteering on my kids' campus, and the amount of lunch waste that I've seen is astounding. We're providing nutrition, or we're providing lunch, we're providing a brunch, and a lot of it ends up in the trash. So I would love in the future if we could just kind of take a closer look at what we're serving our students, and look at like the nutrition value, and is it truly like the biggest bang for our buck?
Can I actually just follow up on that one? And I think I may have said this before at a previous meeting, but just, yeah, like a closer examination at food. I think the food waste is an important piece and kind of bleeds into, composting and the various ways that we can, support our environment, but also just food quality and ways that we can leverage the resources that we have in our local community, in addition to, supporting community members such as local farms and things like that. And what are creative ways that we can get healthier food options in front of our students. It's interesting that you brought this up. I was just having this conversation today at lunch with some friends, and reflecting on the Michael Moore documentary where he compared American school lunches to school lunches in a variety of other countries, and just feeling like we can do better. So let's have that conversation.
Yeah, I've done some research, so I would love to chat and talk it up.
I was wondering if, I don't know if it's an agenda item or just, I guess, something to think about and consider would be, I know the San Mateo Union High School District is considering a vaccine mandate. I know that Los Angeles, just tonight, I think, is mandating it for 12 and up starting in January. And so I would like us to think about this, talk about it, see how this might impact our students. I know that it's mainly 7th and 8th graders at this point that are 12 and up, but just to do a little bit more of a deep dive into figuring out whether that's something we should consider as well.
I would like to request that we discuss in a board study session our after school care programming, and kind of dig into that, because I know that there's a lot of families in our school district that are struggling with after school care, and to the point of like families that don't have someone to take care of their kids while they're at work, and a lot of those students maybe being the student population or being part of the student groups that really need more support. So I'd love to dig into that and have that be agendized at some point.
Okay, it sounds like there are a number of issues that we will be talking about in the near future. I will just make a statement about I want to thank everybody for all your hard work. I was on a call on Monday, or is it Tuesday, with the rest of the San Mateo County trustees, with the San Mateo County California School Boards Association, and Superintendent McGee was on it. But it was very interesting to compare districts, as we've all talked about our COVID responses and everything, and to understand that we have been in school for almost a month now, where some other districts have maybe just started or maybe are only in a week or two. And while we have gone through a number of exposure cases through COVID, and we have testing now on site with our partnership with Virus Geeks, we're doing pool testing. I will just say that we're in the dashboard that is up. I would just say that from everything that I've heard from the public, I would just like to thank you, Superintendent Ochoa, and all your work and all your team's work, because from everything that I'm hearing, the parents are much happier with the response and the communication, the town halls, and everything in terms of COVID as it is at the moment. And so I just want to thank you and thank everybody in the district for all your hard work regarding the Delta surge in COVID. We know that we'll be living with this for a while, but the fact that we've been able to weather the storms pretty well, I think is really a testament to all your hard work. So I just want to thank everybody for all your hard work on that. So moving on, we are on to our next agenda item, which is, sorry, I moved it off of my future board meeting dates.
I'm mute here. Thank you. We have future board meetings coming up on September 23rd, October 7th, and October 21st.
Thank you. And our last item on the agenda is our adjournment. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Watkins, for the motion. Trustee Corzo for the second. Roll call vote. Trustee Corzo.
Yes.
Trustee Barter.
Yes.
Trustee Watkins.
Yes.
Trustee Ward.
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. We are adjourned at 10:11 at night. Thank you, everyone, for attending. See you next time.